The wound is the place where the light enters you. The city never truly slept. Elena Vasquez had learned this in her first year of residency, when New York revealed its nocturnal soul to her. The ambulances screaming through rain-slicked streets, the fluorescent cruelty of emergency waiting rooms, the particular silence of a corridor at 3 a.m. when death had just passed through and left its cold breath on the walls. She was not supposed to be here tonight. She had pulled a double shift, covered for Dr. Marcus Chen, who had a daughter's recital he'd been missing for 3 years running, and she was 17 minutes from walking out the door of Mercy General's surgical wing when the call came. Not through the hospital's official channels, not through the emergency line that would have triggered protocols, paperwork, the inevitable cascade of police reports and government forms. No, the call came to her personal cell phone, and the voice on the other end belonged to a man she had treated once before, a nervous, olive-skinned man named Sal, who had appeared in her private practice waiting room 18 months ago with a gunshot wound he described, with almost comic earnestness, as a hunting accident. She had not believed him then. She did not believe him now. "Dr. Vasquez?" Sal's voice was careful, measured, the tone of a man accustomed to delivering bad news without flinching. "We need your help. Tonight. Right now." "Sal." She kept her voice low. The corridor was empty, but sound travelled strangely at this hour. "Whatever this is, he's dying." A pause. The sound of men breathing hard, of movement, of something heavy being shifted. "Please." She almost said no. The word formed itself in her throat, shaped itself on her lips, reached the very edge of her tongue, and then she heard it. Beneath the controlled urgency of Sal's voice, beneath the shuffling and the hushed commands in what sounded like Italian, she heard something that stopped her cold. She heard a man trying not to make a sound while in tremendous pain. It was a specific kind of silence. She had spent enough years in trauma surgery to recognize the sound of someone exercising iron control over a body that wanted desperately to scream. It was the silence of a person who had decided, at some fundamental level, that showing weakness was not an option. Even now, even bleeding out in the back of whatever vehicle they were moving him in. "Where are you?" she said. They pulled into the service entrance of the private clinic on East 63rd Street, a building Eleanor used for overflow patients from her practice, a discreet establishment that catered to wealthy clients who preferred their medical matters handled with absolute privacy. The clinic's night manager, a young man named Drew, who had the sensible instinct of the professionally incurious, had already been contacted. The lights were on. The rear surgical suite was prepped. Elena was standing at the service entrance when the black SUV rolled in. 4 men climbed out first. They were large, contained, moving with the practiced efficiency of men who had done this before. Men who had carried wounded colleagues through dark parking lots and asked no questions and given fewer answers. They wore dark clothing. 2 of them had blood on their hands. Then they opened the rear doors, and Elena saw him. He was tall, even horizontal, even crumpled against the leather seat, with one hand pressed to his side and the other braced against the doorframe. She could see the length of him, the breadth of his shoulders, the particular physicality of a man who had been built for dominance and was currently refusing to admit that his body had been compromised. His face was turned away from her, dark hair, strong jaw set hard. The suit he wore had probably cost more than her monthly mortgage, and it was ruined. The left side soaked through with blood that was already darkening to black. "Get him inside," she said, because standing here cataloguing a patient was not medicine. She was already moving, already pulling on gloves from the kit she'd grabbed from her car. They got him onto the gurney with efficient roughness. It was only when they wheeled him under the clinical lights of the surgical suite that he turned his face toward her, and Elena Vasquez, who had been prided throughout her career on her ability to remain professionally detached under any circumstances, felt something shift in her chest like tectonic plates. He was, quite simply, one of the most beautiful men she had ever seen. Not beautiful in the soft or decorative sense. His beauty was architectural, all hard planes and deliberate angles, as if someone had designed a face to project exactly one thing: authority. Dark eyes, deep-set, currently fixed on her with an expression of such focused intensity that it took her a moment to register that his pupils were dilated with pain. High cheekbones, a mouth that, in some other context, might have been generous, but was currently pressed into a line of absolute determination. He looked at her the way men in his position always looked at people who had something they needed, with the particular combination of command and barely concealed vulnerability that power could not quite suppress. "You're the doctor," he said. Not a question. His voice was low, accented faintly with something Italian and something New York, a hybrid of origins that sounded like money and danger in equal measure. "I'm the surgeon," she said, "and you're going to stop talking and let me work." Something moved in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or the beginning of something more complicated. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. Elena pressed her fingers along his side, feeling the entry wound, calculating trajectory, assessing how much time she had before the internal bleeding became catastrophic. His jaw tightened. Not a flinch, just a tightening, the body registering pain through the only channel he would permit it. "I know you're my patient," she said. "That's all I need to know." She heard Sal, standing near the door, exhale slowly. Beside her, her nurse, also summoned tonight with a call and a number that had appeared in her contacts without her quite knowing how, was already setting up the anesthesia line. The man on the gurney kept his eyes on her face, dark, still, watchful, even as she cut away his shirt and the full extent of the wound became visible. 2 shots. One had exited cleanly through the side, the other was still in there, and the fragment had done damage. She could see that much from the pattern of the bleeding. "This is going to hurt," she told him, as she always told patients, not as a warning, but as a courtesy, an acknowledgement of what was real. "Everything hurts," he said, and his voice carried something beneath the words, not self-pity, nothing so human as that, but a kind of vast, resigned familiarity with pain that made her pause for just a fraction of a second. Then the anesthesia took him, and Elena Vasquez went to work. She operated for 2 hours and 40 minutes. When she finally stepped back from the table, her back aching and her hands steady in the way they always were when the work was done right, the sky outside the small, high window of the surgical suite had gone from black to deep indigo. The kind of blue that only existed for 20 minutes each morning, the world holding its breath before dawn. Sal was waiting in the corridor. He straightened when he saw her. "He's stable," she said. "The bullet nicked the lower lobe of his left lung. I've repaired it. The fragment came out clean. He lost a significant amount of blood, but the transfusions compensated for that." She stripped off her gloves. He needs to rest. He needs antibiotics. He needs to be monitored for the next 48 hours, and ideally he should not be moved for at least 24. Sal nodded. Whatever you need, whatever it costs. I haven't thought about cost. She looked at him directly. Sal, I need you to understand something. I cannot be in a position where... You won't be, he said quickly. Dr. Vasquez, you have my word. You have his word, though he hasn't given it to you yet. A pause. He doesn't give his word lightly. She wanted to ask whose word exactly she was receiving. She had her suspicions. The name Marino had floated through the surgical suite more than once, not spoken aloud, but present in the air, the way things were present when people were being careful not to say them. She had heard the name before, in the particular way that New York professionals heard certain names. Not on the news, not in official contexts, but in the quiet, meaningful way that people spoke about things that operated beneath the visible surface of the city. Instead, she went to clean up, and she told herself it was over. She was wrong. She was packing her bag at 5:30 in the morning when she heard him. She heard him specifically because she had excellent hearing, and because the clinic was very quiet, and because the sound he made was not quite a groan and not quite a word, but something between the two, involuntary, bitten off immediately, the sound of a man who had surfaced from anesthesia and found the world exactly as difficult as he had left it. She should have sent the nurse. She should have reviewed the chart and signed off and gone home to her apartment and her cold coffee and her 3 unread novels stacked on the nightstand. She went to the recovery room. He was awake. His eyes were open, tracking the ceiling with the careful focus of someone who was mapping their surroundings before allowing themselves to be seen mapping them. He turned his head when she came in, and the movement cost him. She could see it in the fractional tightening of everything, but his face gave nothing else away. "How long?" he asked. "You've been out for about 3 hours. She checked the monitors, because it gave her something to do that was not looking at his face. "Your vitals are good. You should..." "How long before I can move?" She looked at him then. He was watching her with those dark, still eyes, the same focused intensity as before the surgery, except that now there was something else in it. He was taking her in. Not the way men sometimes looked at her as an object or an inconvenience, but as something he was trying to understand, which was somehow more unsettling. "You'll need at least a week before I'd consider you fit to move significantly," she said. "And you shouldn't be moved from here for at least 24 hours. Your lung needs time." He said nothing. He looked at the ceiling. A muscle worked in his jaw. "You're in pain," she said. "I can increase—" "No." Flat. Immediate. Then, after a moment, with the barest edge of something that might have been courtesy, "Thank you." "No." She studied him. The monitors beeped softly. Dawn was fully arriving now, grey light filtering through the window blind. "You should sleep," she said. "I don't sleep well." It was such a simple statement, said without self-pity, without invitation, almost without inflection, just a fact, offered the way one might note a weather pattern. She found herself wondering what it would take to keep a man like this awake at night, what weight he carried into the dark. "Sleep anyway," she said. "Your body needs it regardless of what your mind wants." He looked at her again, that dark, assessing gaze. "Vasquez," he said. Her name in his mouth sounded different, deliberate, like he was filing it somewhere important. Yes? Thank you. A pause that was exactly long enough to mean something.
For what you did tonight.
She left before she could say something she would regret. She walked down the quiet corridor and out into the pale morning, and she told herself that this was finished, that she had done what she had done, and that she would not think again about the man lying in that recovery room with his jaw set against the pane and his eyes carrying something ancient and heavy that she had no business trying to read. She told herself this with great conviction. She did not believe herself. She looked him up. She was not proud of this. She sat at her kitchen table on a Tuesday morning with her second cup of coffee going cold beside her laptop, and she typed the name she had heard in that clinical corridor. Heard not as a statement, but as a silence, the kind of silence that surrounds a name people are afraid to say, and she read what came up. Luca Marino, 41 years old. Born in Naples, raised in Brooklyn, educated, there was an old alumni record somewhere, at Columbia, before whatever had happened had happened. His father, Roberto Marino, had run the Marino family's interests in Lower Manhattan for 3 decades before his death 7 years ago. The circumstances of Roberto Marino's death were noted in 3 separate news articles with carefully identical vagueness. Died of natural causes, each article said, in slightly different words, as if a consensus had been reached. Luca had taken over after Roberto. The official story, the one that existed in the thin, unreliable record of public documentation, was that Luca was a real estate developer and philanthropist. He had his name on 3 buildings and a children's hospital wing in the Bronx. The unofficial story existed in the spaces between facts, in the way certain neighborhoods operated, in the silence of specific city council members, in the careful non-mention of his name in organized crime task force reports that Elena found in a law journal article about jurisdictional complications in federal prosecution. He controlled Lower Manhattan. He had alliances with 2 other families, the Caruso family in Queens and the Vitali family in New Jersey, that had kept a fragile peace for 4 years. He was, by all available indication, extremely dangerous and extremely powerful, and someone had shot him twice in the side at what must have been some kind of meeting or ambush, and he had not made a sound the entire time she was working on him, except for that one involuntary noise when the anesthesia wore off. She closed the laptop. She needed to go back to check on him. This was medical necessity, not curiosity. He was her patient. Follow-up examination was standard practice. The fact that her patient happened to be the most powerful criminal in Lower Manhattan was simply a complicating factor that she would manage professionally. She called Sal. The clinic on East 63rd Street had been transformed overnight. Not dramatically. There were no visible guards, no obvious signs of anything other than a private medical establishment operating normally. But she noticed the car parked across the street that had not been there yesterday. She noticed the way the young man at the reception desk had a particular kind of stillness about him, a watchfulness beneath the practiced warmth. She noticed that Drew, the night manager, looked like he had been spoken to about things and had decided, wisely, to become deeply, professionally incurious. Sal met her at the elevator. "He's been awake most of the night," Sal said, falling into step beside her. He was a compact man, late 40s, with a face that had seen things and processed them into a kind of permanent equanimity. He called his lawyer. He reviewed some documents. He argued with Nico for 40 minutes about something I was not given the details of. A pause. He asked if you were coming back. Elena kept her eyes forward. Of course I was coming back. He's my patient. Yes. Another pause. He asked twice. She did not respond to this. He was sitting up when she came in. This surprised her. He shouldn't have been able to sit up without significant pain, and the fact that he was doing it anyway told her something about how he operated. He had also, somehow, acquired a clean shirt, dark navy, the first few buttons open, and he was reading something on a phone that he set face down on the bedside table when she entered. He looked better than a man who had been shot twice and operated on 7 hours ago had any right to look. He also looked, she noticed with clinical detachment she was not entirely sure she felt, like the kind of man who would look good in any context, in any state of repair. There was a fundamental architecture to him that suffering had not diminished. The bruises under his eyes were new. The particular quality of exhaustion in his face was the kind that came from a life lived at pressure, rather than a single sleepless night. "Dr. Vasquez," he said, her name again. That same deliberate quality, as if he was laying it down somewhere. "Mr. Marino." She came to the bed, picked up his chart, reviewed it with genuine attention. His numbers were good, better than expected, actually. "How's your pain?" "Manageable." "On a scale of 1 to 10? The ghost of something crossed his face, not quite a smile. "That scale doesn't apply to me." "Everything has a scale," she said. "Yours might just start at a higher baseline." She set down the chart and looked at him directly. "I need to examine the wound. Can you—" He was already unbuttoning the shirt. Efficient, matter-of-fact, the gesture of a man who had no self-consciousness about his body, which was, she noted with the professional part of her brain, entirely understandable because the body in question was composed and formidable even in its current damaged state. The surgical dressing was in place. She moved closer. "This is going to be tender," she said. "Everything is tender," he said, and there was something in his voice when he said it, a dryness, but also something underneath the dryness that she could not quite identify and did not try to, because she was examining the wound, and that was what she was here to do. She worked in silence for a moment, pressing carefully, checking the sutures, assessing inflammation. He was still, remarkably still. Most patients, even stoic ones, moved involuntarily under examination. He did not move at all. He simply watched her face. She could feel him watching her face. It created a specific awareness she had no word for and no desire to name. "The sutures are holding well," she said. "There's no sign of infection, which is good given the circumstances of the surgery." She stepped back. "You need to avoid any significant physical activity for at least 2 weeks. The lung repair was clean, but it needs time to fully stabilize. 2 weeks, he said. Not an objection, just a repetition, as if he was placing it against some internal calendar and measuring the inconvenience. 2 weeks minimum. She met his eyes. "I understand that might be difficult given my situation." "Your situation," she agreed carefully. He studied her, those dark eyes, patient and direct, the gaze of a man who spent his life reading other people and had become very good at it. "You know who I am," he said. "You asked me that last night." "Last night you deflected." He was calm about this, factual. "I'm asking again." She considered her response with the care it deserved. "I know your name. I know certain things about you that are publicly available." She paused. "I don't know enough to be dangerous to you," if that's what you're asking. That's not what I'm asking. A pause. I'm asking whether you're afraid of me. The question hung in the air between them. She was aware that it was an unusual question, that a man like this didn't typically ask it, that asking it revealed something about him she hadn't expected to find.
Should I be? She said.
The not-quite smile again, closer this time. Most people are. I'm a surgeon, she said. I spend my time inside the places other people are afraid to look. Fear is a luxury I learned to live without. She held his gaze. You're my patient. That changes the dynamic somewhat. He was quiet for a moment. Outside, the city moved through its morning, indifferent and enormous. Why did you come? He asked. When Sal called, you could have said no. She had thought about this. I heard you, she said finally, in the background of the call. I heard you not making a sound, and something about that. She stopped. It doesn't matter. Tell me. The request was quiet, not a command, or not quite. Something between a command and something more vulnerable than she would have expected. Something about the way you were controlling the pain, she said. It struck me as very human. People who are accustomed to being in control of everything except when they can't be. She looked at him steadily. I couldn't walk away from that. He looked at her for a long time. She could not read his expression fully. There were layers to it that were not accessible to a first conversation, not accessible perhaps to anything short of long and difficult intimacy, which was not something she was in any position to offer. You're unusual, he said. I've been told. It wasn't a complaint. She picked up her bag. She needed to leave before this conversation became something she would have to think about later. I'll come back tomorrow to check the wound. In the meantime, Sal has my number. If anything changes with your breathing, any tightness, any unusual shortness of breath, call me immediately. And eat something. Your body needs fuel to heal. She was at the door when he spoke again. Vasquez? She stopped, did not turn immediately. A beat. Then she turned. He was looking at her with that same dark, considering gaze. In the morning light, he looked tired and formidable, and unexpectedly, like a man carrying something very heavy that he had been carrying for a very long time. You have a good face for this, he said, for telling people hard things. She did not know what to do with that. Thank you, she said, and left. She thought about it the whole drive home. The follow-up visits became a routine. Not a comfortable routine. Elena was not sure comfort was a word that applied to anything involving Luca Marino, but a predictable one, which was almost the same thing. Every other day she came to the clinic on East 63rd Street, and every other day she found him in a state of controlled impatience that manifested as absolute stillness, the way a compressed spring was still. By the third visit, he had moved from the recovery room to a private suite that had been reorganized to accommodate what she was coming to understand was the infrastructure of his life. Several phones, a laptop, a rotating cast of men who came and went with the quiet, purposeful efficiency of a well-trained staff, and an older woman named Carmela, who arrived each morning with containers of food that smelled extraordinary, and who treated Luca with the particular combination of fierce devotion and complete fearlessness that Elena associated with women who had known powerful men since those men were boys. She's been with my family since I was 7, Luca told her on the 4th visit, when Elena asked, because the question had been sitting in her for 2 days, and she was a woman who asked questions. She knew my father. She knows all of it. A pause. She doesn't approve of most of it. And you keep her around anyway. She keeps herself around. Something moved in his face. I've tried to retire her twice. Both times she told me to go to hell. Elena smiled. She hadn't meant to. It happened quickly, involuntarily, the smile that came from being genuinely amused. And she saw him notice it, saw him track it the way a man tracks something he has not encountered in a while. You should eat more, she said, redirecting. Carmela seems like she would be deeply offended by the amount that's left in those containers. Carmela would be offended by the concept of me being shot, Luca said. She has already told me that this is what happens when I don't listen to her advice about the Vitale situation. Was she right? His jaw tightened, not with pain this time. She usually is. She learned things about him the way she learned things about all her long-term patients, not through direct interrogation, but through the accumulation of small observations, the forensic evidence of a human life. He read voraciously, though not what she expected. Beside the phones and the business documents, there were always books, hardcovers, and she caught titles: philosophy, history, poetry. There was a worn paperback of Dante's Inferno that appeared on the 3rd visit and was dog-eared to different pages each time she came. He had no appetite for his own comfort. He bore the physical limitations of recovery with a kind of fierce contempt, as if the body's need to heal was an imposition he resented but would tolerate. He slept poorly. She could see this in his eyes, in the quality of his wakefulness, which was the wakefulness of a man who did not rest deeply, even when circumstances forced stillness upon him. On the 5th visit, she came in to find him standing at the window. He was not supposed to be standing, not yet, not without support, but he was standing, straight and contained, looking out at the street below with an expression she could not see from the doorway. "You're supposed to be resting," she said. "I've been resting for 6 days." His voice was even. 6 days is enough. Your lung says otherwise. She came to stand beside him because examining him from across the room was not medicine. Up close, she could see that he was holding himself with studied nonchalance, and that the studied part of it was costing him. "Sit down, Luca." It was the first time she had used his first name. She realized it after the words were out, and she saw that he registered it. A slight shift in his posture, something that was not quite reaction, but close to it. He sat down, slowly, with the careful dignity of a man who did everything deliberately. She examined the wound in the usual way, clinical, professional, hands steady. The sutures were healing beautifully. The skin around them was pink and healthy. She pressed along the edges with practiced fingers, monitoring for any sign of complication, and he was still in the way he was always still. Except she pressed a particular point along his lower left side, not the wound, but adjacent to it, assessing for referred pain, and she felt something beneath her fingers that shouldn't have been there. A ridge of old scar tissue, faint, decades old, but unmistakable to hands that had spent years inside human bodies. An old wound, long healed, but significant from the size of it. She did not say anything. She continued her examination, but she was aware of it, and she was aware that he was aware she had found it, and the room held a specific tension for a moment that had nothing to do with medicine. "Old," she said finally, because she was a doctor and she would not pretend she hadn't noticed. "That scar, it's very old." "I was 19. His voice was neutral. She waited. In her experience, people either stopped there or continued, and you could never make someone continue. You could only create the space and let them decide. "My father's rival at the time had a different way of resolving disputes than my father preferred," he said. "I was a message. The idea was to send one through me." Elena kept her hands still on his side. 19 years old, and someone had done that to him. "Was the message received?" "My father received it." A pause. "And responded in kind." Another pause. "It was a different time." "Is it so different now?" His eyes came to her face, dark and still, something behind them that she could not quite reach. "You know what I am, Elena." Her name in his mouth. She noticed it. "I know what you do," she said. "That's not the same as knowing what you are." He was quiet for a long moment. She removed her hands, stepped back, the professional choreography of distance. "You talk to me like I'm a person," he said. "You are a person." "Most people don't make that mistake with me." "It's not a mistake." She met his gaze directly. "What would it serve me to pretend you aren't?" He looked at her with an expression she was beginning to recognize. It was the expression of a man who had encountered something unexpected and was deciding what to do with it. Not quite wonder, not quite wariness, something between the two. "You're not afraid of me?" he said again. He had said this before, and it still seemed to puzzle him. "I'm afraid of plenty of things," she said. "You're not one of them." She picked up her bag. "Though you should be careful not to give me reason to revise that assessment. Your lung is healing well. I'll come back in 3 days. Eat what Carmela brings you." She was at the door. "Elena." His voice was quiet. Just her name. Just her name and the particular weight he placed on it, as if names were things you handled carefully. She turned. "What you're afraid of?" he asked, "if not me?" She held his gaze across the room. The afternoon light came through the slats of the blinds and fell across him in bars, and he looked, in that light, like something old and dangerous and complicated, a man shaped by forces she could only partially imagine. "Losing someone on the table," she said. "That's what I'm afraid of." He absorbed this, nodded very slightly. "You didn't lose me," he said. "No," she agreed, "I didn't." She left, and the drive home was longer than usual, though the distance was exactly the same. Carmela Esposito had been in service to the Marino family for 34 years. She had cooked for Roberto Marino when he was building his empire, and for Luca Marino when he was inheriting it, and she had seen enough in those years to fill several books that would never be written, because she was a woman who understood that some knowledge was only useful if it remained private. She was also, Elena discovered on the 6th visit, an extraordinary judge of character. "Sit," Carmela told Elena, in the kitchen area of the suite, while Luca was in the other room on a phone call that Sal had indicated, with quiet urgency, was non-negotiable. "I made biscotti. You look like you haven't eaten since last Tuesday." Elena sat, because Carmela had the kind of authority that did not invite debate, and ate a biscotti, because it was, in fact, extraordinary.
He doesn't sleep, Carmela said, settling across the small table with her own coffee and the comfortable certainty of a woman discussing a subject she knew thoroughly.
He never has. Roberto was the same. Men who carry too much. She looked at Elena with sharp, dark eyes. You've noticed? I've noticed the clinical indicators of poor sleep, yes, Elena said carefully. Carmela smiled. It was a knowing smile, the kind that suggested she had very little patience for professional circumspection. You've noticed him? That's different. Elena ate another biscotti rather than respond. He doesn't talk to people, Carmela said. You understand what I mean. He manages them. He commands them. He is very, very good at appearing to be engaged with people while remaining completely separate from them. She drank her coffee. He talks to you. I'm his doctor. His doctor. Carmela said this with the gentle dismissiveness of a woman who had lived long enough to find euphemisms mildly insulting. He asked Sal yesterday what time you were coming. He had the room straightened up. He put away the files he had spread across every surface. A pause. He does not do these things. Elena set down her biscotti. Carmela, I understand what you might be. I'm not suggesting anything, Carmela said. I am telling you things. What you do with them is your business. She stood, began moving containers from a bag with the efficiency of long practice. I love him like he is my own son. His actual son would have been loved the same if she had lived. A beat of silence. His wife. Did you know about his wife? Elena went very still. No. Carmela was quiet for a moment, arranging food in containers with a care that suggested she was deciding something. Her name was Sophia. She was very lovely, very kind. She did not belong in his world, and he knew this, and he loved her anyway. And she died for it. Her voice was even, but underneath the evenness was something that had been grieved and integrated and was still, 7 years later, a tender place. Car accident, that was the official story. It was not a car accident. Elena absorbed this. The clinical implications she could set aside, the human implications landed differently. How long ago? She asked. 7 years, same year Roberto died. Carmela looked up. He built the hospital wing in the Bronx in her name. Did you know that? Sophia Marino Wing. For children. She paused. He doesn't go there. He cannot go there. But he funds it very generously every year. The room was quiet. From the other room, Luca's voice was audible in a low, controlled cadence that she could not make out as words. Why are you telling me this? Elena asked. Carmela looked at her with those sharp, honest eyes. Because he has not looked at anyone the way he looks at you since before Sophia. And the last time it ended in a way I would not wish on anyone. She paused. And because you seem like a woman who should have all available information before she makes decisions. Elena thought of the dark eyes tracking her across the room, of her name in his mouth, deliberate, weighted, as if he was cataloguing it. Of his question, what are you afraid of? I'm his doctor, she said again. It sounded less convincing the second time. Carmela's expression was kind and entirely without illusion. Of course you are, she said. When Luca came out of the other room, Elena was standing by the window, going over his chart. He moved more freely now. The recovery was going well, better than expected, but she could still see the care in his movements, the deliberate quality of a man relearning the geography of his own body. "Sal tells me there's been a development," he said. "Medically. Otherwise." He came to stand near her, not close, but nearer than the room's width would require. Close enough that she was aware of him. In the peripheral way, she was always aware of him. A low-frequency alertness that she had stopped trying to explain to herself.
"You don't have to tell me," she said. "Your other business isn't my concern." "Someone tried again last night." His voice was flat. "Different approach. They missed." He paused. "My men didn't." She kept her face neutral. She was aware this was the reality she had stepped into when she answered Sal's call. The world that existed beneath the world, where people made attempts on one another and kept score, and survived, or didn't. "Are you hurt?" she asked. He looked at her. Something in his expression shifted. "No," he said. "I wasn't there." "Good." She returned to the chart. "Then your recovery continues on schedule." "Is that all you have to say about it?" She looked up at him. He was watching her with that particular focus, trying to read her, and she let him try, because she had nothing to hide. "What would you like me to say?" she asked. "That I wish your world were different? That might be true, but I can't practice medicine from a position of moral judgment. You're my patient. Your health is my concern. What happens outside this room is my world." He said it quietly, almost to himself. Then, "You said you couldn't practice from a position of moral judgment, but you have a judgment." "Everyone has a judgment," she said. "I just don't confuse it with my job." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "My wife was not supposed to be in my world. She came from Naples, a normal family, a good family." He said this without looking at her, looking instead at the window and the street below, and his voice was very even, in the way that voices were sometimes very even when they were containing something enormous. "I told her what I was before we married. I believed that honesty was protection, that if she understood, she could make an informed choice." Eleanor set down the chart. "But your world disagreed with her choice," she said softly. "My world made an argument about disagreements with me by making her the victim of it." He paused. "Her name was Sophia." "I know," Eleanor said. Then, when he looked at her, "Carmela told me." He absorbed this, looked back at the window. "Carmela should retire. She told me you've tried twice." Something crossed his face that was, unmistakably, affection. It transformed him briefly. The hard planes of his face softened around it, and he looked, for just a moment, like the man he might have been in some other life, one without the weight of all that power and all that grief. "She has a point," he said. "About Sophia. I believed honesty was protection." A pause. "I was wrong." Elena wanted to say something. She wasn't sure what. The clinical part of her brain, the careful professional who maintained appropriate boundaries, was composing several reasonable responses. The other part of her, the part that had heard him not making a sound in the back of that SUV, the part that had found the old scar under her fingers, the part that had somehow agreed to the information Carmela had just given her, that part was simply present with him in a way that did not require words. "You don't have to carry that as a lesson about honesty," she said finally.
Some things that happen are not lessons. They're just terrible. He looked at her. Something in his face she couldn't name. Yes, he said. They are. She picked up her bag. She needed to leave, because staying longer than the examination required was becoming something other than medicine. 3 more days, she said. Then I want to do an imaging follow-up. Your lung needs to be checked properly. I'll be here, he said. She believed him. 3 weeks after the shooting, Luca Marino came to her practice. Not the clinic on East 63rd Street, which had become associated in her mind with the particular intimacy of recovery, the provisional vulnerability of illness. He came to her official medical offices on Park Avenue at 9 in the morning on a Wednesday in a dark car with 2 others that parked across the street in the way cars associated with him always parked, angled for exit, occupants facing outward. He was dressed as she hadn't seen him dressed before. The suit was dark charcoal, perfectly fitted, the kind of clothing that did not announce itself, but simply proclaimed, quietly, that the person wearing it was accustomed to the finest of things. He moved differently too, not with the contained, careful movement of a healing man, but with the full, unhurried authority of someone in complete possession of himself. The recovery had been thorough. She had cleared him for normal activity 4 days ago, and he was clearly taking the clearance seriously. He sat across from her desk, and the office seemed to reorganize itself around him, not because he did anything to make this happen, but simply because that was what happened in rooms he occupied. He was a gravitational force. You didn't have to come in person, she said. I could have sent the imaging results. I know. He looked around her office, taking in the diplomas, the books, the careful personal neutrality of the space. She kept her private life private, even here. There were no family photographs, no personal artifacts. Why don't you have anything personal here? This is a professional space. People put things in their offices. He gestured toward an empty shelf. Something that tells you who they are outside this building. My patients don't need to know who I am outside this building. I do, he said, simply, without apology. She looked at him across the desk. The morning light through the office windows was kind, though his face didn't particularly need kindness. It was the kind of face that held its own in any light. What do you want to know? Anything. A pause. You know a great deal about me. Things I haven't told you, that Carmela has told you, that my own history tells you. And I know. He paused, measuring. That you're very good at your work. That you're not afraid of things that frighten most people. That you hold yourself at a particular distance from everyone, including your patients, except that with me, the distance keeps changing, and you're not entirely comfortable with that. She was quiet for a moment. You're perceptive. It's a survival skill. For what it's worth, she said, I hold myself at a distance because medicine requires it, not because I don't feel things. She stopped, aware she had said more than she intended. He heard it. The dark eyes came to her face with that characteristic focus, that patient, absolute attention. What do you feel? He asked. The question sat between them. Professional response, she thought. Redirect. Maintain appropriate. Concerned, she said. For a patient who operates in an environment that is actively trying to kill him. That's the professional answer. Yes. And the other answer? She met his gaze. I'm still working on the other answer. Something happened in his expression. Not a smile. She was learning the spectrum of things that passed across his face that weren't quite smiles. The slight changes around his eyes, the fractional relaxation of the jaw. This was one of them. "Fair enough," he said. She gave him the imaging results, which were good. The lung was healing cleanly, the scar tissue forming normally, no residual complications. She reviewed his limitations, which were now minimal. She said all the things a doctor said at the end of a successful recovery course. Then she said, "I'd like to continue monitoring you, monthly, for the next 6 months." He looked at her. "Is that medically indicated?" She held his gaze. "It's prudent, given the history of your recovery." "Prudent," he repeated. The word in his mouth had a quality that suggested he knew exactly what it did and didn't cover. "Yes," she said. "Monthly," he said. "Monthly." He stood. She stood. The office felt smaller than usual, and she wasn't sure whether that was because of him or because of the way she was acutely aware of the distance, or lack of it, between them. "I have a dinner on Friday," he said, "a function for the children's hospital." He paused. "Sophia's wing." She kept her expression neutral. "That's good. The foundation benefits from your support." "I don't usually go." His voice was even. "I prefer to keep my support at a financial distance." He looked at the window. "This year I'm being persuaded otherwise. There's a board member who feels my absence has begun to look pointed." "It's been 7 years," she said gently. "Showing up doesn't dishonor her." His jaw tightened. Not pain, something more complicated. "I know," he said. "I know that intellectually." He looked back at her. "Will you come?" The question arrived with no particular framework, no softening, no elaborate social scaffolding. Just the direct request of a man who had apparently decided that if he was going to ask something, he would ask it clearly. Elena processed several things simultaneously: the ethics board implications, the professional complications, the way her heart had performed a small, unauthorized movement at the question. "That would be unusual," she said, "given our relationship." "Our relationship is already unusual." He said this without irony and without heat. "You're the only person in my life who speaks to me without agenda or fear. You treat me like someone worth being honest with." He paused. "I don't have a great deal of that." She thought of Carmela. "He does not do these things." "I'll think about it," she said. He nodded. He picked up his jacket. He laid it across the chair, another unusual thing, a gesture of ease, and moved to the door with that unhurried authority. "Vasquez," he said at the door. She looked up. "The other answer," he said. "Take your time, but don't take too long." He paused. "I'm not a patient man, but for the right things—" He stopped. Something crossed his face she couldn't quite read. "I've learned to wait." He left. She sat at her desk for a long moment, doing nothing at all, which was extremely unlike her. She called Sal that afternoon. "I need information about the dinner on Friday," she said. Sal was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. "I'll send you the details," he said, and she could hear, very faintly, what might have been satisfaction in his voice. She told herself she was going as a courtesy, as a professional gesture toward a patient's well-being. She told herself this approximately 15 times while she was getting dressed on Friday evening, and she did not believe it once. The dinner was at the Pierre Hotel, the kind of event that New York's philanthropic establishment staged several times a year. Immaculate floral arrangements, a string quartet playing tastefully in the background, women in gowns that announced their cost through studied understatement, men in evening wear who had the look of people for whom this was not special occasion dressing, but simply another room to occupy. Elena wore a dress she had bought 3 years ago for a medical conference award dinner and had worn once. It was dark green, simple, cut well, the kind of dress that didn't require anything from the person wearing it. She was not a woman who needed ceremony. But when she caught her reflection in the lobby mirrors of the Pierre, she allowed herself to think that she looked, at minimum, appropriate. The function was for the Sophia Marino Memorial Foundation. 200 guests, a silent auction, presentations from hospital staff about programs funded by the foundation. The room was full of people who knew things about money and nothing about the woman whose name was on the wall. And Elena thought, arriving, that this was the particular loneliness of legacy. The person most missing from rooms built in their honour. She had been there for perhaps 8 minutes, standing with a glass of sparkling water near a window that looked out over Central Park, when she felt him. She felt him before she saw him, a change in the room's atmosphere, a subtle shift in the way people oriented themselves, the way a magnetic field reorganizes iron filings. Then she looked up, and he was there, across the room, and he was already looking at her. He was in black tie, and the effect was significant. The dark jacket and white shirt formalized his particular kind of beauty into something almost architectural, the way evening wear on certain men did not soften them, but simply raised the register of what they already were. He was accompanied by 2 men she didn't recognize, who were clearly not companions so much as presences moving in his orbit. He excused himself from something. She saw it, the exchange, the other people's faces doing the thing people's faces did when they were talking to him, a mixture of deference and the slight unease of proximity to something powerful, and crossed the room to her. She watched him come. She had time to compose herself, and she did. "You came," he said when he reached her. "I said I would think about it." She met his eyes. "I thought about it." The not quite smile, closer than it had been in the clinic, here in this different context, this different register of his life. "You're the most honest person I know," he said. "I hadn't expected that to be so refreshing. Most people find it inconvenient. Most people aren't me." He looked at her dress, a single, quick assessment, not prurient, but thorough, the way he assessed everything. "Green," he said. "It suits you." "I'll add it to my diagnostic checklist," she said. "Patient making aesthetic observations, recovering well." He laughed. She had not heard him laugh before. It was a low, brief sound, contained and genuine, the laugh of a man who didn't do it often enough for it to have become practiced. It changed his face entirely for the moment it lasted. Then it passed, and he was himself again, controlled and formidable and watchful. But something had shifted in the room between them. They sat at the same table, which she suspected had been arranged deliberately, though she had no proof. Around them, conversation wove through topics that moved carefully past anything complicated. Real estate, charity, the season's upcoming cultural events. Luca engaged with it all with polished ease, and she watched him do it, watched him be the version of himself that this room required, charming and present, and keeping everything at exactly the right distance. She saw when the foundation director spoke about Sophia's wing. She saw it in the fractional change in his posture, The particular quality of his stillness during those minutes, the way his hand on the table became very quiet. She didn't touch it. It wasn't her place, but she was aware of it with a physical precision. After, during the period when people circulated and the string quartet moved to something more ambient, he appeared at her elbow. "I need air," he said. She followed him. It was the most natural thing in the world, which should have alarmed her. There was a terrace off the hotel's upper floor, accessed through a set of glass doors that most of the evening's guests had not discovered. The city spread below them, the park dark and textured to the west, the towers of Midtown bright against the sky, the particular density and illumination of New York at night that always struck Elena as something between the beautiful and the relentless. Luca stood at the railing. He had a glass of whiskey, untouched. She stood beside him, close enough to talk. "How do you do it?" he said. "Do what?" "Be in this room, in any of these rooms." He gestured back toward the lights of the function. "The performance of normalcy." "It's not performance," she said. "Most people are genuinely there for something good. The foundation helps children." "Yes." He was quiet. She would have liked that. Sophia. A pause. "She wanted children. We were—" He stopped. "It wasn't going to happen quickly. We were careful. We were going to wait until things were more settled." And things never got settled. Things in my world don't settle. He said it without bitterness, just factual, the way he stated most things. I knew that. I chose to believe it might be different. Elena looked at the city. "That's not a mistake," she said. "Believing things might be different. That's just hope." "Hope in my world is a liability." "Hope in any world is a liability," she said. "People do it anyway." He looked at her. In the nighttime light, his face was shadowed and precise, the lines of him clean and uncompromising. "What do you hope for?" he asked. She thought about it honestly, because he deserved honest thinking. "To keep getting better at my work," she said. "To save the ones I'm supposed to save. She paused. "To feel like my life is adding up to something." "Doesn't it?" "Sometimes, when the work goes right." She paused. "I don't think about the other things very much. The things outside work." "Because you're afraid of them?" She looked at him. "You asked me that before." You didn't fully answer. He held her gaze. "The things outside work, Elena. You're afraid of them." She was quiet for a moment. The city breathed below them, its endless, indifferent respiration. "Yes," she said, "I suppose I am." He was very still beside her. "What, specifically?" "Wanting something and losing it," she said, the most honest thing she had said in a long time. "I've lost things, not the way you have, but enough to understand that wanting something creates a specific kind of exposure, a vulnerability." She paused. "I'm good at not wanting things, and bad at it when the wanting shows up anyway," he said. She looked at him. He was watching her with that complete, focused attention, and she understood suddenly that this was not a clinical observation he was making, that he was speaking carefully about both of them. "Yes," she said. "Bad at it, then." He turned back to the city, but his shoulder was close to hers now, closer than it had been, and neither of them moved away from the proximity.
"I will destroy whatever I touch," he said. "This is not self-pity. It is a pattern. It is a documented pattern in my life. The people closest to me pay for it." "That's not invariably true," she said. "Sophia was murdered because someone wanted to send you a message," she said. And the words were direct because she was a woman who didn't avoid the thing that needed to be said. That's not the same as being destroyed by proximity to you. That's being used as a weapon in someone else's war. He was very quiet. "The difference matters," she said softly. "Does it?" His voice was low. "To the person who's gone?" She had no answer for that. Some things were simply terrible, and the comfort of distinctions did not reach all the way down into the grief. They stood in silence for a while. Below them, the city continued its indifferent, gorgeous existence. Inside, the string quartet began something slow, something that drifted through the glass doors like a memory of another time. "I don't want to do this," he said. It was barely above a whisper. She understood that by this he didn't mean the evening. "I know," she said. And yet, she agreed. They went back inside. They were careful about how they went back inside, not together, not quite, and Elena understood that carefulness with a clarity that had nothing clinical in it at all. The monthly check-ins became something else. She would not have been able to say precisely when the transition happened. There was no specific moment she could identify where they crossed a clear line from one thing to another. It was gradual, the way water works through stone. Not a single force, but the accumulation of many small ones, each individually insufficient, together irreversible. He came to her office on the first Monday of October, which was their second scheduled follow-up post-recovery, and instead of leaving after the clinical portion of the visit was complete, he stayed. He had brought coffee from the place on Lexington that she had mentioned once in passing 3 weeks ago. He had remembered. He had sent someone, presumably, to get it, because men like Luca Marino did not stand in coffee queues. And yet, here was the coffee, precisely the way she took it. "You remembered," she said. "I pay attention," he said. They sat across from each other in the office chairs, not at her desk, which would have been too clinical, and not on the small sofa near the window, which would have been something else. The chairs were a middle ground they had established without discussing it. He told her, that day, about the Vitali situation, the dispute that had been behind the shooting in August, the alignments shifting in New Jersey, the delicate negotiation that was still unresolved. He told her not because she needed to know for medical purposes, but because she was someone who could hear it without flinching, without the layers of calculation and self-protection that everyone else in his life applied to information about his world. She listened. She asked questions, direct, practical, unclouded by agenda. "You think like a surgeon," he said, when she pointed out an element of the negotiation he hadn't considered. "You look for the thing that isn't where it should be." "That's just logic," she said. "Your associate in Brooklyn. What's his relationship with the Vitali family personally, not professionally?" He looked at her steadily. "His sister married Vitali's nephew," he said slowly. 8 years ago, before any of this. Then his loyalties are divided and he knows it, and that means his advice during the last negotiation round was compromised. He sat back, looked at the ceiling. Something moved through his expression that she was becoming better at reading. The integration of new information, the recalculation, the particular quality of a formidably intelligent person revising their map. "I should have seen that," he said.
"You were recently shot," she said. "Your attention may have been elsewhere." He looked at her, the not quite smile. "You're remarkable," he said. She deflected because she was not ready for that. "I'm observant. It's different." "Not in my experience." She changed the subject, or tried to. He let her redirect, which was considerate, but the air in the room held the word remarkable like a held breath. He called her 12 days later at 11 at night. She was awake. She was often awake at 11, the particular insomnia of a person whose mind did not release its grip on the day easily. She saw his name on her phone screen, and the lurch of recognition was immediate, and said things she was not ready to articulate. "Luca, I woke you." "You didn't." She moved to the window of her apartment, the way she always did when she talked at night. New York outside, the ambient light that never fully left, the city as context and witness. "What is it?" "Nothing medical." A pause. "I should let you—" "What is it?" she repeated. Her voice was gentle. She had a particular tone for the middle of the night, for people in difficulty, and she used it without calculating. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "It's the anniversary of Sophia. I'm not—" He stopped. She could hear him breathing. She could hear what was underneath the breathing, the vast weight of grief that didn't have a place to go in his life, the grief of a man who ran an empire and had no one to be undone in front of. "Tell me about her," Helena said softly. Another pause. "I've told you. You've told me facts," she said. "Tell me about her, what she was like." Silence. Then he began. She sat on her windowsill and listened. He talked for almost an hour about Sophia from Naples, who had been small and fierce and funny, who had opinions about wine that were better than most professionals, who had been frightened of his world but had walked into it with her eyes open, because she said that loving someone meant loving the full reality of them, who had made him, for a few years, believe that the full reality of him was something a person could love. Elena listened to all of it. She did not interrupt, except to ask a question here and there, the kind of question that opened a door rather than closing one. When he finally went quiet, the silence was different from the silence at the start. It was the silence of something that had been given air. "Thank you," he said. His voice was rough at the edges. "You don't have to thank me for listening." "I do," he said, "because you're the only person I've told any of that to." A pause. "In 7 years." She held the phone. Outside, New York continued its interminable conversation with itself. "You should sleep," she said, "if you can." "I told you I don't sleep well." "Try anyway." She paused. "Are you—" She stopped herself. "What?" "Are you safe?" she asked. The word carried everything she didn't say along with it. A silence. Then, "Yes, I'm safe." "Good." She took a breath. "Call me tomorrow if you want to." "I will." He did. He called her the next day, and the day after that, and the conversations moved through terrain that had nothing to do with medicine and everything to do with the strange, dangerous, mutually recognized thing that was building between them. His world and her world. His grief and her guarded hope. His darkness and her particular kind of light. She told herself she was his doctor still. She told herself the relationship had clinical dimensions that required maintenance.
She told herself a great many things, and the city listened to all of them and was not fooled. Chapter 8. Empire and Edge. The problem with the Vitale situation escalated in November. Elena learned about it the way she had begun to learn about most things in his world, not through news reports, which said nothing useful, and not through the careful official silence of law enforcement, which said even less, but through Luca himself, who called her on a Thursday afternoon in a voice that was stripped of everything except directness. "I need to ask you something," he said, "and I need you to be honest with me." "When have I been anything else?" "Never." A pause. "That's why I'm asking you." She was between patients, standing in the corridor of her office, and she stepped into an empty examination room and closed the door. "Go ahead." "There's a meeting tonight, with Vitale himself, his terms, his location." He paused. "I know what this means. I understand what it could mean. But if I don't go, the negotiation collapses," she said, "and the alternative to negotiation is not something I want to explain to you." She pressed her back against the wall of the exam room. She was a surgeon, not a diplomat, not a strategist, not a woman who gave counsel on the internal politics of organized crime syndicates. She was none of these things. And yet... "Go," she said. He was quiet. "But don't go under his terms," she said. "Go under circumstances that give you the exit you'd need. And take enough people." She paused. "I'm not telling you how to run your world, but you know it better than anyone. The asymmetry of the situation is telling me something I should have noticed sooner." His voice was quiet and focused. "He's proposing terms he thinks I can't afford to refuse, in a location he controls, at a time he's chosen." "Yes. Which means he wants a conversation, not a resolution. What does a conversation serve him?" "Information," Luca said. "He wants to know how much damage the August shooting did, whether I'm operating at full capacity or whether there's an opportunity." A pause. "He wants to look me in the eye." "Then let him. Just make sure you're looking back from a position of strength." Silence. She could hear him thinking. She had become familiar with the quality of his silences. This one was the silence of recalibration, of a very sharp mind rearranging what it knew. "You understand my world better than you should," he said. "I understand power dynamics," she said. "They're not so different in a hospital. The same basic architecture, different vocabulary." A small sound that was not quite a laugh. "Thank you," he said. "Be careful," she said. The two words carried everything she didn't say, and she knew he heard what was underneath them. "I will be," he said. And then, quietly, with a weight she felt in her sternum, "Eleanor." "Go," she said. "Call me when you're done." She stood in the empty exam room for another minute after the call ended, the phone in her hand, the clinical silence of the room around her, and she was honest with herself in the way she could only be when no one was watching. She was in love with him, or something that was going to become love if she let it. The distinction barely mattered. She was also afraid, not of him, never of him, but of what love in his world would mean, what it had meant for Sophia, what it could mean for anyone. She went back to work because she was a woman who went back to work. He called at midnight. She answered on the first ring. "It went well," he said, "differently than expected, but well."
She exhaled. Tell me. Vitale's situation is more... He paused, choosing words. More compromised than he allowed us to understand. He needs the alliance more than we do. The shooting in August was not his order. Someone inside his organization acted without his sanction, and he's been... Another pause. Dealing with that. So the dinner was not about assessing your weakness. No. It was about assessing whether I would give him room to manage his own problem without war. A pause. I gave him room. Was that the right call? I believe so. Time will answer more fully. She heard movement. He was somewhere, she thought, near a window, near an exterior sound. But yes, tonight went the way it needed to go. Good. I kept thinking, he said, about what you said, about the asymmetry. A pause. It changed how I walked into the room. The room did that, she said. You would have figured it out. I might have, but having you to call made me sharper. His voice was quiet. I don't have that. Someone who engages with me fully, without the other things, without the fear or the angle. You have Carmela. Carmela tells me when I'm wrong in the same way that a mother tells a child, with love, but without engagement. She does not engage with the work. A pause. You engage with me. She pressed her lips together. Outside her apartment, the city did what it did. That's a complicated compliment. It wasn't meant as a compliment, he said. It was meant as... He stopped. She heard the careful quality of the pause, the precision of a man choosing his moment. I need to see you. Your next appointment is not an appointment, he said. I need to see you as... He seemed to be negotiating with some internal resistance. As someone I want to see, not a patient, not a follow-up. The room was very quiet. Her apartment, and then the city, and then the space between them. Luca, I know, he said. I know all the reasons. I'm not unaware of what this is and what it shouldn't be. I know what my world did to the last person He stopped, started again. I know. I'm telling you anyway, because you have been the most honest person in my life for 4 months, and it would be disrespectful to be dishonest with you about this. She sat down on her bed. The darkness of the room held her. What do you want? She asked softly. Dinner, he said. Just dinner. Somewhere... A pause. Somewhere that isn't an office or a clinic or a hospital function. He paused. If you're willing. She thought about every sensible thing she had ever told herself about him. She thought about what Carmela had said, and what Sophia's story meant, and what she herself had said about wanting something creating exposure and vulnerability. She thought about the night on the Pierre Terrace, his shoulder close to hers, and his voice at midnight on the anniversary of Sophia's death, and the way he said her name like it was something he was keeping safe. Saturday, she said. A pause. Then, quietly, Saturday. Somewhere not too visible, she said, and heard the wryness in her own voice, the acknowledgement of what they both knew they were becoming. I know a place, he said. I'll send the address. After she hung up, she sat for a long time in the quiet of her apartment, and she was honest with herself again, because that was the only way she knew how to be. She was afraid, and she was going anyway. The restaurant was in the West Village, the kind of place that existed beneath the surface of New York's visible food culture. No name on the door, access through an unmarked entrance in a building that appeared from the street to be a residential brownstone. A small dining room with perhaps 15 tables that was booked solid for 6 months by people who knew it existed and told no one else. Elena arrived at 8, wearing a black dress she had bought on Saturday afternoon, after changing her mind 3 times about what to wear, and she had barely crossed the threshold when the maitre d', a small, elegant Italian man with the discretion of a man who had been discretion itself for 40 years, addressed her by name and brought her to a corner table, where Luca was already seated. He stood when she approached. She noticed this. He stood, which was a gesture she had not expected, and which affected her in a way she was not going to analyze. "You look," he started, stopped. Something in his face was different from every other time she had seen him. The controlled precision was still there, but beneath it was something more exposed, a tension that was not power, but vulnerability. The tension of a man who had wanted something and was now confronted with having it within reach. "You look beautiful," he said. "I don't have a more sophisticated version of that." "Beautiful is fine," she said. She sat. He sat. Between them, the small table held 2 glasses of red wine that had been poured in advance, a gesture of consideration that someone had known what she might drink, and she was not going to examine too carefully how he knew. "How did you find this place?" she asked. "I knew the family that owned it," he said, 30 years ago. They sold it to their nephew, who kept everything the same." He looked around the room, the low light, the exposed brick, the paintings that were original rather than decorative. "Some things you want to preserve." "Is that why you come here?" "I haven't come here in some years," he said. "I used to bring my father on his birthday when I was in my 20s and had just begun to understand what his life was and what mine would be." A pause. He liked it because no one who mattered to any of his opponents would know to look for him here. "And no one who matters to yours does either?" "Sal does. The dry quality of it, just barely. But Sal knows about everything." She smiled, lifted her wine. The red was extraordinary, deep and complex, and she had enough experience with wine to understand that this was not an ordinary selection. "You paid attention," she said, "to what I drink." "I pay attention to everything that involves you," he said. Calm, not flirtatious, not performing, just stating a fact. The directness of a man who had decided to stop pretending. She set down her glass. She looked at him directly, because that was the only way she knew how to do anything. "We should talk about this." "We should eat first," he said. "Then we can be as serious as you need." She almost argued. Then the food arrived, small plates, exquisite, the kind of Italian cooking that she had tasted in her life perhaps 4 times, and that always struck her as a conversation with another century, and she understood that he was right. They should eat first. They ate. They talked. But not about the thing they had agreed to talk about later. They talked about other things. Her training. The years in Boston, at Mass General, before she came to New York. The choice to build a private practice rather than stay in a hospital setting. He asked questions with genuine curiosity. The questions of a person who wanted to understand rather than to accumulate. He talked in his turn about Columbia, the strange parallels between a university education and the world he had grown up in, the philosophical studies he'd done in his first year before his father had needed him, before the world had claimed him fully. "You could have been something very different," she said. "Possibly." He was thoughtful. "Though I'm not sure I believe in the alternative self very strongly. We are what we choose to survive." A pause. "The choice is narrow with time." "That's not entirely true," she said. "People change fundamental things about themselves. It's rarer than it should be, but it happens." "You believe people can change?" "I believe people can choose to change," she said, "which is different. Change is a decision, and then the sustained work of making the decision real." She looked at him. "Do you want to change?" He considered this the way he considered everything, thoroughly, without performance. "I want—" He stopped, started again. "There are parts of what I am that I would—" He paused again. "Some things can't be undone. The structure of what I've built, the obligations, the history." He met her eyes. "But there are things I want that I haven't wanted in a long time." She held his gaze. "What things?" The candlelight sat between them. The restaurant moved at its quiet pace, other tables in other worlds. "This," he said. His voice was low. "This." Specificity. A table and a conversation and someone who... He stopped. "I want to tell you things I don't tell people," he said. "I already have been, and I want you to let me." "Let you tell me things?" "Let me—" He paused. "Be in proximity to you. In a way that isn't professional. In a way that—" He stopped. His jaw worked. She watched the difficulty of it. A man accustomed to total command, trying to articulate something that command couldn't organize for him. "In a way that matters," she finished softly. His eyes came to her face. "Yes." She looked at the table, at her wine, at the small, perfect plate of something that a chef had made with care. She thought about Sophia. She thought about being afraid of wanting things and losing them. She thought about herself at 43 years old, very good at her work and very alone in the specific way that people who chose work over everything else were alone. "I need you to understand something," she said. "Tell me." "I don't do things part way," she said. I don't know how to be casually involved with someone. I don't know how to hold things at a managed distance." She met his eyes. "If I'm in, I'm in. That's the only way I know how to be. Which means—" She paused. "Which means I need you to be honest with me about what this is and what it can and can't be. Because if I start—" She stopped. "I need to know the full reality." He was very still, listening with complete attention, the way he had listened on the Pierre Terrace, the way he listened to her on the phone at midnight. "My world is dangerous," he said. "I cannot make it safe. I cannot—" His voice was quiet and very precise. "I cannot promise that proximity to me doesn't carry risk. I know what that risk has cost before. I cannot pretend I don't know." I'm not asking for a promise of safety, she said. I'm asking for honesty. You have my honesty, he said. Whatever else is uncertain, that is not. He paused. And I will... He stopped. Something passed across his face, an emotion she could see but not quite categorize. I will do everything in my power to make the risk as small as possible. To protect... He paused. To protect you from what I am. I'm not afraid of what you are, she said. I know. His voice was rough at the edge. That makes it... He stopped. Elena. Yes. I have not felt like this. He stopped again. He pressed his lips together. Since Sophia, he said. I have not felt like this since Sophia, and I am aware of how dangerous that sentence is to have said. She looked at him across the table. The candlelight and the brick walls and the city outside existing in its complicated, enormous indifference. I know, she said. And? And I'm still here, she said, at the table. Something in his face, not the not-quite smile, something fuller, something that cost him more to show. He looked at her for a long moment, and she let him look, and neither of them said anything for a while, and it was one of the best silences she had ever sat in. Dessert, he said finally. She laughed. Yes. November deepened into cold, and with it the thing between them deepened too, accumulating like snow, quietly, persistently, changing the landscape by degrees until the original contours were beneath it and a new geography existed. She learned the specific topography of his darkness. He did not sleep. She had known this clinically. She came to know it in the way you knew things about people who called you at 2 a.m, not because anything was wrong, but because the night had become unbearable with its particular quality of silence, and they needed a voice, another human being on the other end of the line, a connection to the waking world. She never told him not to call. She adjusted her sleeping habits to accommodate the interruption, which she recognized as a significant adjustment, and which she made without calculation. He was haunted. Not in any gothic or dramatic sense. He did not speak of ghosts. He was not a superstitious man. But he carried the dead with him. His wife, his father, men who had died because of decisions he had made or failed to make. The long accounting of a life lived in that world. He was lucid about it. He did not romanticize it or excuse it. He simply carried it. And some nights the weight was heavier than others. On a particularly heavy night in mid-November, he appeared at her apartment door at 11:30. She had not buzzed him in. He had not called from downstairs. He had a level of access to things that she was choosing not to examine too closely. And her doorman, she had noticed, had recently acquired a particular ease of manner around certain individuals she didn't need to name. She opened the door, and he was there, in a dark overcoat, snow in his hair from the beginning of what would be the season's first real snowfall, and he looked at her for a moment without speaking. I don't have a reason, he said, for being here. I was driving, and I stopped. She stepped back from the door. Come in. Her apartment was warm. She had been reading, a novel she had been making progress on for 3 weeks, because she had been spending her late hours on the phone and sleeping less than she should. And the lamp was on beside the sofa, and a mug of tea was going cold on the table. He came in. He took off the coat. He looked around her apartment with the same attention he applied to everything, taking it in, cataloguing it, finding the things that told him about her. She let him look. There was more of her here than in her office. The books in double rows, the small piece of art she had bought in Florence during a medical conference 10 years ago, the photographs on one bookshelf, her mother and her sister in Bogotá, a view of mountains she had climbed once as an experiment and enjoyed more than she expected. "This is you," he said. "Yes. More than the office." "The office is where I work," she said. "This is where I live." He came to the bookshelf with the photographs, looked at them. "Your family?" "Mother and sister. Colombia. My father died when I was 12. She said the last part simply, because it was simply true, and because he, of all people, understood that some deaths simply happened and had to be carried. He was a doctor too, pediatrician. I followed him into medicine and then went somewhere different with it. "What drew you to surgery?" She thought about it. "The immediacy," she said, "the directness. You find the problem, you fix the problem. The body either cooperates or it doesn't, and you do everything in your power, and then the outcome is what the outcome is." She paused. "I like clarity." He turned from the bookshelf, looked at her. "And then you got me as a patient," he said, "which is the opposite of clarity." "You're very clear," she said. "That's part of what's unusual about you." She moved to the kitchen, began making another cup of tea, her hands needing something to do. "Most things in your world are ambiguous and layered and complicated. You're not. People find me inscrutable. People find you powerful," she said. "That's not the same as inscrutable. They're too occupied with the power to look at the person." She poured the water. "You're actually quite clear when someone's paying attention." She heard him move. She turned, and he was closer, not close in the way that required anything, but close in the way of someone who had crossed a particular internal distance without announcing it. "What do you see?" he asked. His voice was low. She looked at him steadily. "A man who carries more than anyone should," she said. "Who is intelligent enough to know the full weight of what he does, and strong enough to carry it, and sufficiently alone that the combination has been very heavy." She paused. "And who is, underneath all of it, more capable of ordinary human things than he believes himself to be?" He was very still. "Ordinary human things," he repeated. "Grief," she said. "Love. The desire for a table and a conversation and someone who sees you." She held his gaze. "Those are ordinary human things. They don't belong only to ordinary people." He moved. 1 step, 2. And then his hand was at her face, not reaching for her, but arriving, the way something arrives that has been travelling for a long time. His thumb against her cheekbone, his dark eyes very close, very still. She did not move away. She looked up at him. "Elena," he said. Her name, as always, deliberate, safe. "I know," she said. "I know what this is. Do you know what it will cost?" "I know what everything costs," she said. "I'm a surgeon. Cost is the first thing I calculate." She held his gaze. "I've done the math, Luca." Something broke open in his face, just briefly, A fracture in the control, a flash of something that was raw and real and unguarded. The man behind the empire, behind the authority, behind the 7 years of locked-away grief. She saw him fully in that moment. He kissed her. Carefully at first, the precision of a man who was aware that this was irreversible and wanted to begin it correctly. Then less carefully, then not carefully at all, because some things cannot be managed by precision. She kissed him back. She had decided. She had done the math. Outside, the first snow of the season came down over New York in the slow, deliberate way of something that intended to stay. He did not keep her separate from his world. She had expected he might try, that the instinct to protect by compartmentalizing would override everything else. Instead, he did the opposite. She saw his penthouse for the first time on a Sunday in late November, when he called in the morning and asked if she would come for dinner. And she said yes, and was collected at 4 by Sal, who drove her north through Sunday traffic in the comfortable silence of a man who had made his peace with being present for things without being part of them. The penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a building in Tribeca that from the street appeared to be a converted industrial building of some distinction. The lobby was marble and cool. The elevator required a key. The doors opened directly into a foyer that opened into... She stopped, because the view was extraordinary. Manhattan, from this height, in the late afternoon of a clear day, was a different city entirely. The grid laid out below, the rivers on either side, the bridges strung like jewellery, the light at this hour turning everything amber and deep gold. The apartment itself was large and spare, and had been furnished with the taste of a man who understood beauty without needing to announce it. Dark wood, leather, pieces of art that she recognized as significant without being able to name. Books everywhere. Books everywhere. She had not expected that. You collect them, she said, moving along a wall of shelves. I read them, he said behind her. The collection is a side effect. She pulled out a spine, Italian, a philosophy text she didn't know. Beside it, a novel in English she had read twice. Beside that, something in Latin she couldn't translate. The library of an omnivorous, curious mind acquired over a long time. I've never known anyone who read the way you do, she said. Survival, he said. You read philosophy when you make decisions that affect whether people live or die. It helps to understand what others have thought about the weight of that. She turned. He was watching her from across the room, in the amber light of the window, and he looked, for a moment, like someone who had built all of this, and was only now unsure what it meant. Do you ever think about a different life? She asked. Every man thinks about a different life, he said. By 40, you've thought about it so many times, the fantasy has become familiar, and therefore useless. That's honest. I told you. Always. Carmela had made dinner. She appeared from the kitchen at 6 with the energy of someone who had been here all day and was not remotely apologetic about it. And she looked at Elena and then at Luca and then back at Elena and said simply, "Good," with the satisfaction of a woman whose predictions had been confirmed. "Carmela," Luca said. "What?" She set down a ceramic dish with the authority of a woman who had been setting down ceramic dishes in this kitchen for 3 years. "She's good for you. I said so. Sit down, both of you." They sat. The dinner was, she could not think of another word for it, nourishing. Not just the food, which was exceptional, but the quality of the evening, the way Carmela talked and Luca listened and occasionally argued, and the apartment held all of it, with its particular combination of luxury and something more lived in than she expected. After Carmela left, with the pointed cheerfulness of a woman who had done what she came to do and was now giving them appropriate privacy, Elena and Luca sat with their wine at the kitchen table, and it was quiet. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," she said. The kind of thing she would not usually say, the kind of thing that belonged to this specific evening and nowhere else. He turned his glass in his hands. "I have a brother," he said. "Half-brother. My father had a relationship years ago, before my mother. The result was a boy." He paused. "He's never been part of the family. He knows who his father was. He chose to stay away." A pause. "I don't know him. I've tried to. There's money. There's always been money he's provided for, but we've never—" He stopped. "There are things you build that exclude people who should have been inside them." She absorbed this. "Have you ever tried to reach him directly?" "Once." His jaw. He made it clear that the Merino name was not something he wanted. A pause. "I understand why. I didn't like it, but I understand." "What's his name?" "Marco." The name in his mouth with a particular weight. "Marco Ferrara. He lives in Philadelphia. He teaches school." Something moved in his face. "He teaches 3rd grade." Elena looked at him. The magnitude of what was unsaid there. The brother who had escaped the world that had claimed Luca, who had become something Luca could have been, who lived in a clean, normal life in another city, teaching children arithmetic. "Do you envy him?" she asked softly. A pause. "Sometimes," he said. "Less than you might think. What I have—" He gestured vaguely at the apartment, at the city, at everything. "What I am, it is what I am. It was chosen for me before I could choose. I have made the most of it I know how to make." He met her eyes. "But yes, sometimes I think about a life that isn't this." "What would it be?" He looked at her for a long moment, then, quietly, "Something like tonight." The words landed in the room and stayed there. "Luca, I'm not being sentimental," he said, "or not only. I mean it as precisely as I mean everything." He held her gaze. "Tonight is the most uncomplicated I have felt in years. And uncomplicated is not something I am entitled to by the nature of what I am." He paused. "I want to deserve this. I'm not sure I do." She reached across the table, put her hand over his on the glass. "You don't have to deserve things to have them," she said. "That's not how it works." His hand turned under hers. His fingers closed around hers with a careful, deliberate firmness. "You're going to teach me things," he said. "I've been teaching you things for months," she said. "You've been a reasonably good student." The smile, not the not quite version. The real thing, full, brief, transforming, and she understood, looking at it, that this was rare enough to be precious. "Stay," he said. She looked at him, at the apartment and the city and the life behind his eyes. "Yes," she said. She woke in his bed to a city still grey with early light, and for exactly 30 seconds she existed in the uncomplicated space between sleep and consciousness, where everything was simply sensation. The quality of expensive sheets, the ambient warmth of a room that had been heated against the November cold, the sound of the city 40 floors below, muffled and distant and thoroughly indifferent. Then she was fully awake, and she was aware he was not beside her. She had expected this. She had come to know something about how he occupied mornings, the watchful early rising, the inability to rest in the ordinary way. She lay still for a moment, processing the event of being here, in this place, in this life she had not planned for herself. She was not afraid. She checked. It was the kind of morning where she needed to check, to take an honest reading of herself. And what she found was not fear, but the particular clarity of a woman who had made a significant decision and found it solid beneath her feet. She found him in the kitchen. He was making coffee with the focused attention he applied to everything, and he was dressed, dark trousers, white shirt not yet buttoned, barefoot, which was unexpectedly intimate for a man who was always so precisely assembled. He turned when she came in. "You're awake," he said. "You weren't in the room." "I haven't slept past 5 in 20 years, he said. "I didn't want to wake you." She came to the counter, and he handed her coffee, and she looked at him in the morning light. This person who had arrived in her life through a gunshot wound and an after-midnight phone call, and had become, somehow, the most significant person in it. "No regrets?" she asked. She asked it directly because she was a direct person. He set down his cup, looked at her with the full weight of his attention. "None," he said. "You?" "No," she said. He came around the counter. He stopped close, the distance he had been maintaining for 4 months, the careful professional space she had maintained in return, was simply gone. He put his hand in her hair, and she looked up at him, and his expression in the morning light was something she had never seen from him before, unguarded, present, and somewhat terrified. "I need you to know—" He stopped, started again. "What I feel for you is not—" He stopped again. Something was frustrating him, the inadequacy of words for a man who generally required them to be very precise. "I am not a man who says things he doesn't mean," he said finally. "You know this." "I know this," she said. "What I feel for you," he held her gaze, "is more than I know what to do with, and I know what to do with a great deal." She smiled. "That's the most complicated version of a simple thing anyone has ever said to me." "Yes, well, the ghost of wryness. I work with what I have." She put her hand on his chest, felt his heartbeat, strong, steady, the heart of a man who was physically formidable and, she now knew, not at all as impervious as his exterior suggested. "I know," she said. "I feel it too." The complications arrived, as complications always did, before she was fully ready. She was in the kitchen at 7:30 when his phone went. He took it in the other room, and she heard the quality of the conversation change, the shift from the morning's particular ease into something else, the register of his authority, the focused, clipped efficiency of a man dealing with his world. He came back after 10 minutes. His face had changed. "There's a problem," he said. "I need to deal with it." He met her eyes. "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize," she said. "This is your life." "This is one part of my life," he said. He crossed to her, and the gesture that followed was careful and deliberate. His hands on her face, briefly, tilting her face up. "Last night was another part." He held her gaze. "I don't want to. I need you to understand that the world that's calling right now is not more important. I understand that, she said, and you need to go. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, brief, precise, weighted with something she didn't have a word for. Sal appeared. He had apparently been present in the building all night, which was both professional and slightly startling, and things began to organize themselves around the problem Luca was already solving before he had properly left the kitchen. Elena gathered her things. She moved through the apartment with the careful attention of someone memorizing it. The books, the art, the view of the city, all of it filed away for later. At the door, he stopped her. "Tonight," he said, "I'll call." "I know," she said. "Elena." Her name. The weight of it. "Thank you." She looked at him. The suit was on now, the professional architecture of his power fully assembled, but his eyes were the same dark, unguarded quality she had seen over the coffee cups at dawn, the man inside the empire. "For what?" she asked. "For being here." A pause. "For letting me be here." She touched his face briefly. Then she walked out, into the elevator, into the lobby, into the cold, bright morning of New York in late November. She took a cab home. She sat in the back, watching the city go by, and she held the fact of last night inside her chest like something warm. She was in it. She had been honest with herself, and then she had done it anyway. She was terrified. She was also, she acknowledged with a kind of careful wonder, happier than she had been in a very long time. December arrived with the weight of the holiday season, and the particular way New York answered it. Extravagant decorations, traffic that went from difficult to impossible, a quality of urgency in the streets that had less to do with joy than with the city's fundamental conviction that everything needed to be done faster. Elena's practice was busier than usual. The seasonal pattern of her work brought more patience, the stress of the holidays manifesting in bodies, the deferred procedures that people scheduled for December thinking it was the calm before January, the accidents and emergencies that winter generated. She worked longer hours and slept less, and found, with some surprise, that she did not resent it. Because at some point in the evenings there was a call or a car outside, or a knock at the door, and the day compressed into manageable size. She was learning his world in small pieces, the way you learned a language that was not taught in any classroom. She learned it from Sal, who had taken to treating her with the specific, respectful warmth he might have offered a general's wife. Not quite an equal, but something more than peripheral. She learned it from Carmela, who had decided that Elena's presence in Luca's life was the answer to a prayer and treated her accordingly. She learned it from the newspaper stories that mentioned people connected to people she now knew, and from the things Luca told her himself when the evenings were long and the city was quiet outside. The Vitale situation had stabilized. The peace held, fragile as all peace in his world was fragile. 3 men who had been responsible for the August shooting had been, Luca told her one evening with the neutral precision of a man reporting a weather event, addressed. She did not ask what that meant. She asked instead, "Are you safe now?" For the moment. He looked at his hands, large, still. In my world, safety is a conditional state. It depends on conditions, and conditions change. "That's true of everything," she said. "It's just less literal in most people's lives." "Yes." He paused. Does this trouble you? What you don't ask about?" She considered. "I've thought about it," she said. "I'm a doctor. I believe in informed decisions, and I've decided—" She met his eyes. "I've decided that knowing the specifics wouldn't change what I know in general. I know what you are. I know what your world requires. The specifics are—" She paused. "They belong to you. They're your weight to carry, not mine." He was looking at her with an expression she had seen before, the one that emerged when she said something he hadn't expected, when she demonstrated the particular clarity of her thinking. "Most people in relationships with people like me," he said slowly, "either need to know everything or need to know nothing. You're neither," she said. "I know what I need to know to love you." She paused, hearing the word, feeling it land in the room. "And the rest is—" she exhaled. "The rest is yours." The word had been said. She had said it first, in the way she did everything, directly, without architecture, without the performance of uncertainty. She watched him absorb it. He was very still for a moment. Then he moved across the room and sat beside her, and he took her hand, and he held it in both of his, in the specific way he had of holding things he was careful about, like her name, like the coffee order, like the morning after, like everything she had seen him be deliberate about. "Elena," he said, her name again, always. "I know," she said. "You don't have to." "No," he said. "Let me." A breath. "I love you," he said. "I have been—" He stopped. "This is not something I have said easily or often. You know that." "I know." "But I have been—" He paused. "Since the night at the clinic, when you told me my pain level didn't fit a scale of 1 to 10, I have been—" He stopped again. Something moved in his face. "Moving toward this," he said, "without quite meaning to. And then meaning to very much." He held her gaze. "I love you. And I am aware of what that means, and what it could cost. And I'm—" He stopped. "I'm asking you to let me love you anyway." She looked at him. 43 years old, a life full of work and careful distances and things she hadn't let herself want. "Yes," she said. "Obviously, yes." He pressed his lips to her temple, her cheek, the corner of her mouth. Small, precise gestures that meant everything he couldn't organize into words. A man who was meticulous about language, saying the things that language couldn't hold. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, against her hair. She pulled back enough to see his face, something in his expression. "What is it?" "The situation with Vitale," he said. "It's more complicated than I told you. There is—" He paused. "Someone has been asking questions about me, about my personal life, recent months, who I see, where I go." She went still. "They've been asking about you," he said, directly, because he was honest with her, and this required the same courage as all his other honesty. "Someone knows that you've been treating me, and more recently," he paused, "more recently that you are something more." She processed this. Clinical detachment helped briefly. "How much do they know?" "Enough to be a complication," he said. "I'm dealing with it. I have people dealing with it. But I need you to know." His eyes were on her face, very steady, very direct. "Because you told me you needed the full reality. And this is part of it." She took a breath. She thought about what it meant. Someone watching, someone gathering information, someone who might decide that she was, as Sophia had been, a useful message to send. She thought about being afraid of wanting things and losing them. She thought about already being in. "What do I need to do?" she asked. Something moved in his face. "You don't need to do anything. You need to let me—" "Don't," she said gently. "Don't tell me not to be involved. I am involved. Tell me what I need to do." He looked at her. Then he nodded, a small, deliberate acknowledgement. "Stay close," he said. "Don't vary your schedule without telling Sal, and if anything feels wrong, call me first, before anything else." "All right," she said. "Elena." The weight of her name. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry," she said. "You warned me. You told me the risk. I made the math." She held his gaze. "I'm not going anywhere." His jaw worked, something behind his eyes, vast and complicated. "I know," he said. "That's what frightens me." Chapter 14. Fracture Lines. She did not know she was being followed until the 4th day. In retrospect, she had been aware of something, a quality of being watched, peripheral and vague, that she had attributed to heightened awareness in the wake of Luca's warning. A car she noticed twice on different streets. A man in the lobby of her office building who appeared to be waiting for someone who never arrived. Small discontinuities in the texture of ordinary days. On the 4th day, the man who had been in the lobby followed her to the parking garage. He did not approach her. He stood at a distance as she reached her car, and when she looked directly at him, he looked back with the flat, assessing eyes of a professional. Then he was gone. She sat in her car for 2 minutes, hands on the wheel, heart rate elevated in the professional, clinical way she recognized as controlled fear. Then she called Luca. "I know," he said, before she could describe it. "2 of mine have been tracking it since yesterday. I was going to tell you tonight." "Tell me now," she said. He told her. The man in the lobby was connected to a family in New Jersey. Not Vitali's operation, but something adjacent, an organization that had been orbiting the edges of Vitali's world and had apparently seen the current period of instability as an opportunity. They had been gathering information on Luca's vulnerabilities for 6 weeks. Elena was, apparently, identified as a significant one. "Vitali is not behind this," Luca said. "I need you to understand that. The peace with Vitali holds." "I believe you," she said. "What happens now?" "I handle it." "Luca," her voice was level, "what does handle it mean?" A pause. "It means the situation is being addressed through channels that are appropriate to the situation." She pressed her lips together. She understood what that meant. She was choosing, as she had chosen, not to ask for the specifics of it. "Are you safe?" she asked instead. "Right now." "Right now I'm in my car outside your parking garage," he said. She looked up. Through the exit of the garage she could see the street, and the dark car she had come to associate with him was there, angled for exit. "You've been out there since you left your office." She sat with that for a moment. The particular care of it, the fact that he had been there, present, while she had been inside being watched and not knowing he was watching too. "You could have come in," she said. "You needed the space to notice it yourself," he said. "You needed to know you weren't imagining it. If I had come in, it would have been—" A pause. "Managed. You don't like to have things managed for you." She exhaled. You know me too well. I pay attention, he said. I told you this. Come up, she said. Come up to my apartment. We'll talk. I'll be there in 10 minutes, he said. She sat in the car for another moment after he hung up. She was not afraid, she decided. What she felt was something more complex than fear. It was the recognition that she had made a choice, and the choice had weight, real weight, and the weight was pressing on her now in a way that required her to hold herself very steady. She was a surgeon. She went into things knowing they could go wrong. She prepared as well as she could, and then she worked with what the moment gave her. She went upstairs and put water on for tea, and when the knock came at the door, she opened it, and he was there. And the sight of him, the familiar lines of him, the dark coat, the particular quality of his attention when it was directed entirely at her, steadied something that had been uncertain. I should leave, he said, immediately upon entering. The risk to you— Don't, she said. We discussed this. We discussed it when it was theoretical, he said. Now someone is following you through parking garages. You handled it, she said. You said so. I handled the immediate situation, he said. The broader— He stopped. He moved to the window, looked out, the habitual assessment. Then he turned. Elena, I have done everything possible to make you safe. But the nature of my world means that everything possible may not be enough, and I— His voice dropped. I cannot. Cannot what? She said. He looked at her. Something in his face that she had seen before, on the Pierre terrace, on the morning after, on the night he had called her about Sophia. The fracture in the control, the man behind the empire. I cannot be responsible for you the way I was responsible for Sophia, he said. His voice was very quiet. I cannot. She crossed the room. She stopped in front of him. I am not Sophia, she said, not unkindly, with love, but directly. I am a different person, making a different choice with full information. The parallel doesn't hold. The risk is the same. The risk is different because the information is different, she said. Sophia didn't know everything. She knew what you told her, but she couldn't fully— She paused. I have spent 4 months inside your world. I understand the architecture of it. I am not naive about what it means. She held his gaze. I made the math, Luca. I made it carefully and I made it honestly. And the answer I got was you. The risk is part of the equation, not a disqualification of it. He looked at her for a long time. You are the most terrifying person I have ever met, he said. I'll add that to my CV, she said. He put his arms around her. Not the careful, deliberate gestures of earlier months. This was something else, something with urgency in it, the grip of a man who was afraid and was expressing it the only way that made sense. She held on. I'm not going anywhere, she said into his shoulder. You need to stop waiting for me to leave. I'll try, he said. His voice was rough. He paused. It's hard to believe that someone stays. People stay, she said. For the right reasons, people stay. They stood in the middle of her living room while the city made its indifferent nighttime noise and December pressed its cold hands against the windows, and she felt him breathe, and she breathed too, and the world was, for the length of that moment, exactly the size of the two of them. The event of Christmas Eve was, in the way that such events always were, both inevitable and a surprise. Elena was at her office, clearing charts before the holiday, when the call came. Not from Luca, not from Sal, but from a number she didn't recognize, and the voice on the other end was a woman's voice, cultured and cold, and the woman said, "Doctor Vasquez, I think we should speak." The woman's name, given after a pause that was precisely calibrated for discomfort, was Adriana Conti. She was, she explained, associated with the family whose man had been in Elena's parking garage. She was calling because she had a proposal. "I'm not interested in proposals," Elena said. "You haven't heard it. I don't need to." She kept her voice even, clinical. "You should be aware that this conversation is being recorded and that Luca Marino is going to know about it within the next 10 minutes. A silence. Then, "You're more like him than I expected." "I'll take that as a compliment," Elena said. "Goodbye." She hung up and called Luca immediately. He was at her office in 11 minutes. The next 72 hours were, Elena would later think, the axis on which many things turned. She learned, in pieces, what happened when Luca Marino was presented with a direct threat to someone he loved. She saw the efficiency of it, the quiet, organized, absolute efficiency of a man who had spent his adult life making problems go away. She saw the layers of his operation that she had previously only half understood, the communication structures, the speed with which people moved in response to his direction, the way information flowed through his world like current through wire. She also saw, for the first time, the cost of it on him. He came to her apartment on the second day of the 72 hours, late, after a series of conversations and developments she was only partially briefed on, and he sat at her kitchen table, and he was exhausted, in a way she had not seen him be exhausted before. Not the surface exhaustion of a healing body, but the deep exhaustion of someone who had been making terrible decisions for 2 days and carrying every one of them. She made food, simple things, eggs, bread, the comfortable ordinariness of a midnight kitchen. She set a plate in front of him and sat across from him and let him eat without asking for a report. When he finished, he looked up at her. "Adriana Conti's organization is no longer a concern," he said. She nodded. "How complete?" "Complete." His voice was flat in the way that voices were flat when the flatness was covering something heavy. No one was... He stopped. The resolution was not violent, for once. A pause. Vitale assisted. It was in his interest to clarify the situation. "Good." She reached across the table. He took her hand. "And you?" "Tired." A long pause. Eleanor. Her name, the weight of it, greater tonight than usual. "I want to tell you something." "Tell me." He held her hand between both of his, the way he had on the night they said what they felt for each other. "In the past 2 days," he said, "I have made a number of decisions that I would not have made if I were—" He paused. "If my judgment were purely professional. I was—" He exhaled. "I was afraid for you. And that fear affected my judgment." She looked at him steadily. "I am not—" He stopped, started again. "The decisions I made were still the right decisions. I believe that. But the speed of them, the urgency—" He shook his head. "Caring about you has changed the way I operate. I am not equipped to—" "Luca." He stopped.
"Stop," she said. "I know what you're about to say, and I need you to hear me." She held his gaze. "Yes, caring about someone changes things. It creates urgency. It affects judgment. That is not a failure of your operation. That is you being human." She paused. "The alternative to that is being the kind of man who doesn't care about anyone. And I don't want that man. Do you understand?" He was very still. "The part of you that moved fast because you were afraid for me," she said, "is the part of you I fell in love with. Do you understand?" He closed his eyes. She had never seen him close his eyes. When he opened them, they were different. Something had come through, some piece of grief or relief or both, a tide that had gone out and come back changed. "I understand," he said. She squeezed his hand. "Come to bed," she said. "You need to sleep." "I told you, I know what you told me." She stood, still holding his hand. "Come try, anyway." He came, and that night, for the first time since she had known him, he slept. Not deeply, not easily, but he slept, his body finally surrendering to the exhaustion it had been carrying, his head on the pillow beside her, his breathing evening out in the particular rhythm of genuine rest. She lay awake beside him for a while, listening to him breathe, and she thought about the word love and what it actually was. Not the story version, not the clean, uncomplicated feeling of a straightforward life, but this: a man sleeping beside her who carried the weight of his world into his dreams, whose history was scarred and whose present was dangerous, and who was, underneath all of it, someone she wanted to be next to in a dark room at midnight. This was love. This specific, complicated, fully real thing. She finally slept too. January arrived with snow that lasted, and with a period of such unusual quietness in Luca's world that it felt, Elena thought, like the calm that preceded weather. Not peace, but potential energy, stored. They navigated the question of her knowledge and his world during this period, working out, through a series of conversations that were sometimes easy and sometimes not, where the lines were and who they were to each other inside the lines. She did not pretend that his world was something she fully endorsed. He did not pretend that he was going to become a different person. They built, between them, a structure that was honest about what it was, which was, she thought, better than most structures built on more comfortable fictions. She attended, in January, a meeting that she would later understand as a threshold. It was not described to her as a meeting. Luca said there were people he wanted her to meet, friends, a word he used with specific care, she noticed, in the context of his world. Friends did not mean what it meant in ordinary life. It meant people who had earned a level of trust and proximity over time. The location was a restaurant in Little Italy that was, she understood from contextual clues, connected to Luca in ways that went beyond normal ownership. The room was private. There were 8 people at the table, including Sal and Carmela, and the others were men and women who occupied different positions in the architecture of Luca's world. A lawyer, a city official, whose identity she carefully did not examine too closely, the head of the Caruso family from Queens, who was named Dom and had the build of a former athlete and the eyes of a careful man, and Dom's wife, Rosaria, who pulled Elena aside before the meal to say, with the bluntness of a woman who had lived in this world for 30 years, He's different. Since you. I've known Luca since he was 30, and I've never seen him like this. Don't break it. I won't, Elena said, and meant it. At the table, she sat to Luca's right. He was, in this room, the version of himself that was different from any other version she had seen. Not performing authority, simply embodying it, the natural occupant of the space. But when he looked at her, the quality of his attention changed, and she could see it change, and from the corner of her eye she saw Dom notice it and exchange something with Rosaria, and she understood that she had just been seen as something specific in his world. Not a vulnerability. Something else. Something that, in the complex calculus of the world these people lived in, meant that a line had been drawn around her. After the meal, driving back uptown, Lucas said, "They like you." Dom's wife told me not to break it. Rosaria says what she thinks. He glanced at her. She's usually right. Usually? Always. He was quiet for a moment. I want to ask you something. She looked at him. Ask. I want you to move in with me. He said it simply, in the way he said everything he had decided about. Not tentative, not performing casualness, just the direct statement of what he wanted. Not because of the security considerations, though they're relevant, because... He paused. Because I sleep when you're there. That has never happened. Another pause. And because the apartment is different with you in it. She was quiet. Outside the window, New York went by in its January state, austere and cold and magnificent. This is fast, she said. It's been 6 months, he said. I don't experience time the way other people do. When something is right... He paused. I am not good at waiting for permission from the calendar. She smiled. She was looking at the window, so he didn't see it. I would need to keep my apartment, she said, for my independence. Not because I'm uncertain, because I need the option. I need to know it's mine. Of course, he said immediately. And I need to be able to continue my work without interruption or complication. I would never. I know you wouldn't intentionally, she said, but your world creates turbulence. I need to protect my practice from it. I understand. He was thoughtful. I'll talk to Sal about... Not Sal, she said. This is between you and me. The logistics of it. Sal can handle the logistics of your world. This is our arrangement. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you're right. He glanced at her. This is not something I'm accustomed to. Having an hour that operates separately from the rest. You'll learn, she said. You'll teach me. I'll teach you, she agreed. He reached across the console, his hand on hers. Yes, he said. Yes, she said. Obviously, yes. And in the dark car moving uptown through January New York, something settled into place between them that had the particular quality of things that are real, not perfect, not uncomplicated, but real, and permanent in the way that real things were permanent even when the circumstances around them changed. She was going to be a part of his life, fully and specifically and with her eyes open. She was afraid, and she was doing it anyway, and by now she understood that this was how all the things worth doing began. She moved in on a Saturday in February, which was not at all what moving into a penthouse in Tribeca should feel like, and was exactly what it felt like.
boxes, and the particular domestic comedy of merging two people's lives in a space that had been organized around only one of them. Her books fit nowhere initially. His shelves were full. He solved this by having an additional wall of shelving built in what became, with very little discussion, her study. A room that had previously held exercise equipment that was relocated to a closet, and which became, through the addition of her books and her desk and the Florence painting and one of the kitchen chairs she particularly liked, recognizably her space inside his space. She found the piano on the third day. It was in a room she hadn't properly explored, a smaller room off the main corridor, used for nothing in particular except storage of things that didn't fit elsewhere. Against one wall, under a dust cloth, was an upright piano. It was not ornamental. It was an actual piano, older, with the kind of wear that meant it had been played. She pulled the cloth off and sat down on the bench and played a scale. In tune, maintained, used not too long ago. She went to find Luca. He was in his study on a call, and he held up one finger, wait, and finished whatever he was finishing, and then looked at her with the particular attention that meant he had already assessed that something was on her mind. "The piano," she said. A pause. Something moved across his face. "Sophia's," he said. She played very well." He looked at the wall, in the direction of the room. "I kept it. I couldn't." He stopped. "I couldn't make myself get rid of it. But I couldn't have it in a main room either." "Of course," she said. He looked at her. "Do you play?" "Some," she said. "Not well. I learned as a child. I haven't played in years." "Would you—" He paused. "Would you want it moved somewhere more accessible?" She thought about it. "No," she said, after a moment. "I think it should stay where it is. But I might play it sometimes, if that's—" "Yes," he said. The word was simple and contained something more complex. She went back to the piano room later that evening, after dinner, when the apartment was quiet. She sat at the bench and played some things she remembered. Simple things, exercises from childhood, a few bars of a piece her father had liked. The piano had a warm, slightly worn sound, the sound of an instrument that had been loved. She was aware, as she played, that he was in the doorway. She didn't turn. She played for a few minutes longer, and then she stopped, and the room was quiet with the fading of the notes. "She would have liked you," he said. His voice was from the doorway, and it was very quiet. Elena sat still for a moment. "How do you know?" "She liked people who were honest," he said. "People who didn't pretend. People who engaged with the full difficulty of things, without flinching." He paused. "She would have recognized you." Elena turned on the bench. He was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her with those dark eyes. In the soft light of the piano room, he looked, as he sometimes looked, like someone who was carrying something vast and had learned to carry it with grace. "I think about her sometimes," Elena said. "Whether she would—" She stopped. "I think about whether what we have would feel like a replacement," he said. Quiet, not defensive. "I've thought about that too." "And?" "You're not a replacement," he said. "What I feel for you, it doesn't erase or diminish or—" He exhaled. "It's not the same." Nothing would be the same as something else. You're different. What we are is different. He held her gaze. I don't love her less because I love you. I don't love you differently because I loved her.
They're separate. They're both real.
She looked at him. That's the healthiest thing you've said in months, she said. Carmella's been very insistent about this point, he said dryly. Carmella is wise. Carmella is terrifyingly wise, and I am grateful every day that she has chosen to use her wisdom mostly for good. Elena stood from the piano bench. She crossed the room to him, and he uncrossed his arms, and she came to rest against his chest. Not a dramatic gesture, just a quiet one. The uncomplicated weight of two people choosing to be near each other. His arms went around her. February, he said. You're here in February. I live here, she pointed out. I'm going to be here in March, too. I know. His voice held something that was not quite wonder, but close to it. I keep expecting it to... He stopped. Old habit. Expecting people to leave, she said. Yes, I told you. She leaned back enough to look up at him. I don't go part way. When I'm in, I'm in. I know, he said. I'm learning to believe it. Learn faster, she said. He laughed, the real laugh, the rare one, the one that changed everything. And in the piano room of the penthouse in Tribeca, with the city spread invisible below them and the night pressing its quiet face against the windows, they stayed like that, not solving anything, not moving toward anything, just existing in the space they had built between them. It was, she thought, exactly enough. Spring came. The city shook off its winter and became something more permeable, more mobile. Windows open, the smell of the park reaching blocks in every direction, the quality of light changing from the blue-white of winter to something more golden and more complicated. And with spring, a complication. His name was Marco Ferrara. He appeared in their lives not through any design, not through the gradual accumulation of small introductions, but through a crisis. A phone call that came one morning in April while Elena was getting ready for work, and that she heard through the half-open bathroom door because Luca's voice, which was always controlled, had gone to a register she hadn't heard before. Not quiet, but nearly soundless, as if the volume had been turned down on something that should have been loud. She came out of the bathroom to find him standing at the window, phone in his hand, not on the call anymore. What happened? She said. Marco, he said. My brother. He turned. His face was, she searched for the word, stripped, as if several layers of the controlled surface had been removed. He's in a hospital in Philadelphia. He stopped. There was an accident. It's serious. She was already moving. I'll drive, she said. Get Sal. The drive to Philadelphia took 3 hours with traffic, and Luca spent most of it on his phone, dealing with things that were invisible to Elena, but apparently urgent. And then, for the last 40 minutes, he put the phone down and looked out the window, and she did not interrupt the quality of his silence, which was something she had become skilled at reading. At the hospital, a good hospital, she noted professionally, checking her instincts against the signage and the staff movement, she found the attending physician and introduced herself not as Luca's partner, but as a colleague, surgeon to surgeon, and got the full picture. Marco Ferrara had been in a car accident. He had a fractured pelvis, 2 broken ribs, and a collapsed lung. The collapsed lung was the immediate concern, and it had been addressed, and he was stable, but recovering under significant pain management. She explained this to Luca in the corridor, translating the medical facts into terms that were honest and complete, because he deserved honesty and completeness. He listened. He processed. He asked 3 precise questions. Then he asked, "Can I see him?" She arranged it. She did not go in. She understood, instinctively, that the room where Luca Marino met his half-brother for the first time in an adult relationship was a room that did not require a third person. She sat in the corridor on a plastic chair. She who spent her working life in hospitals and still found hospital corridors somehow alienating. And she waited. He was in there for an hour and 20 minutes. When he came out, he looked the way he had looked after the difficult decisions in December. Stripped, tired. Something in him that had been compressed, released slightly, and was reorganizing around the release. He sat down beside her. "He's angry," Luca said. "He has been. Angry for a long time." A pause. "I don't blame him. He's right about most of it." "What did he say?" "Many things." Luca looked at his hands. "Some things I needed to hear. Some things I had already said to myself, in worse versions." He paused. "He wants me to know that that he accepts the money not for himself, but because it allows him to do more for his students. He wants me to understand that." "Does that matter to you?" "Yes," he said. "It matters." He was quiet. "He asked about you." She looked at him. "Carmela," Luca said, with the kind of resigned fondness that Carmela inspired reliably. "She apparently spoke to him. Several months ago." A pause. "She told him I was different. That there was someone." His jaw worked. "He asked if you were good for me." "What did you tell him?" He looked at her. The full weight of his attention, those dark eyes, everything she had been learning to read over months. "I told him you were the best thing that had happened to me in 10 years, he said, and that you had agreed to share my life, which was either very brave or very foolish." "What did he say to that?" "He said, probably both." A pause. "He wants to meet you, when he's better." He held her gaze. "If that's—" "Yes," she said. "Of course, yes." He nodded. Some of the stripping in his face resolved into something quieter. He paused. "I've been wrong about Marco. I told myself that keeping my distance was protecting him, from the name, from the world, from what I am." He exhaled. "But it was also protecting me from having to be accountable to him, from having to be someone's brother." "And now?" "Now he has a broken pelvis and is in a hospital in Philadelphia, and I drove here in 3 hours, and he talked to me for 80 minutes, and—" He stopped. "And I think I am going to learn how to be someone's brother." He looked at her. "You were right, about the hospital wing and Sophia, about what showing up means, about—" He paused. "About choosing to be present, being different from replacing what was lost." She took his hand. "You're learning fast," she said. "I have a very good teacher," he said. They sat in the hospital corridor while spring light moved through the high windows, and Marco Ferrara recovered in a room down the hall, and the world, for all its complications, held still for a moment around the two of them. Summer arrived in the way New York summers always arrived, all at once, as if the city had decided overnight that winter had gone on long enough, and was correcting the error aggressively. The park was full. The nights were warm and loud. The penthouse, with its views and its height, caught the long summer evenings in gold. They had been living together for 4 months. The apartment had reorganized itself around both of them in the incremental way of shared lives. Her coffee beside his on the counter, her handwriting on the grocery list, her coat beside his at the door. The geography of two people's existences gradually overlapping until the overlap was the primary territory. She had been thinking for 3 weeks about the future, the specific shape of it. It was a Sunday morning in June when she finally said the thing she had been circling. They were in the kitchen. Carmela was coming for lunch, which meant the Sunday had a certain organised quality it wouldn't otherwise have had. And Luca was reading at the table, and she was making the coffee that she had fully taken over making, because his version was, by her assessment, inadequate, and the sunlight was doing something extraordinary to the room. "I want to talk about something," she said. He set down his book. He always did this, immediately, fully, the complete redirection of attention. She had come to understand it as one of the ways he showed her that she mattered. "Go ahead," he said. She set down the coffee pot, turned to face him. "Your world," she said, "the structure of it, what you do." She held his gaze. "I've been thinking about it, seriously, not abstractly, not as a condition I've accepted, but seriously, as a question of what the future actually looks like." He was very still. "I'm not asking you to leave it," she said. "I understand what you've built, and what you owe, and what can and can't be undone. I'm not naive about that." She paused. "But I want to know, honestly, as clearly as you can say, what you see. When you look forward, what do you want the next 10 years to be?" He considered this for a long time. She let him consider. "Less," he said finally. "I want fewer things to carry. The structure of what I've built, the legitimate parts of it, and I mean legitimate genuinely, the real estate, the foundations, the—" He paused. "There are parts of what I do that could exist without the rest. That could be what they appear to be on the surface, rather than what they are underneath." He met her eyes. This would take time, years, and the transition would be delicate. How delicate? Dangerous at certain points. He was honest. There are people who benefit from the current structure who would not benefit from a different one. Moving out of certain arrangements would require negotiation, and in some cases would not be possible without conflict. "But it could be moved toward," she said. He was quiet for a moment, then, "Yes, with patience and the right architecture." He held her gaze. "Is this what you're asking? Whether I want to move towards something different?" "I'm asking whether you want it," she said. "For yourself. Not for me. Not as a gesture in my direction. For you." The room was very quiet. The city, 40 floors below, went about its business. "I'm 41 years old," he said. "I have built something that my father would—" He paused. "That my father would recognize and respect, and that has served certain purposes." He looked at his hands. "But yes, when I imagine—" He stopped. Marco teaches third grade, he said. He comes home at 4 in the afternoon. He coaches a kids' soccer team. He is uncomplicated in his own life. A long pause. I will never be Marco. I don't want to be Marco. But I think I want to understand what it feels like to come home to the same place and have the day be... He stopped again. Simple, he said. I want to understand what simple is. She crossed the kitchen. She sat down across from him. That's enough to work with, she said. It's not a plan, he said. No, but it's a direction. She held his gaze. And I want to move in it with you. If it's everything, he said. The word came out with a weight that made the room feel different. It's what I want. He paused. Do you understand what you're saying yes to? Years of complication before Luca. She said his name with the particular warmth she had for him that was different from anything else she'd ever offered anyone. I did the math, remember? Something broke open in his face, the fracture she had seen before, but this time it resolved into something different, something that was not grief or fear, but something closer to the opposite of those things. I remember, he said. She reached across the table. He took her hand. I have something to ask you, he said. His voice was quiet and very precise. She looked at him. She waited. He reached into the pocket of his robe, the domestic Sunday morning robe, the ordinary life accessory that had become her favourite version of him, and set something on the table. It was a ring. Simple, platinum, a single diamond that was not small but not ostentatious, the ring of a man with taste who had thought about what would suit the person he was giving it to, the ring of someone who had been thinking about this for some time. Elena Vasquez, he said. Her name, as always, exact and careful, placed down like something precious. You have been the most unexpected and necessary thing to happen to me in the second half of my life. You have seen me in ways I did not know I needed to be seen. You have stayed in ways I did not know I could be stayed with. He paused. I am not easy. My world is not easy. The future I can offer you has complications I would give anything to remove, but cannot. A breath. But I can offer you honesty. I can offer you this. He gestured at the space between them, the apartment, the Sunday morning, Carmela coming at noon. Whatever simple we can build together. I can offer you the genuine attempt made with everything I have. He held her gaze. Will you marry me? She looked at him. The dark eyes, the precise, beautiful architecture of his face, the man she had met on a gurney at 3 in the morning, bleeding and dignified and not making a sound. The man who had asked her if she was afraid of him and been genuinely puzzled when she said no. The man who could not sleep and read too much and called at midnight and had learned, over months, to let himself be loved. The man with the wound that she had healed, and the wounds she was still learning. Yes, she said. Obviously, yes. He picked up the ring and slid it onto her finger, with the same deliberate care he applied to everything he handled with his hands. He held her hand for a moment, looking at it. Then he looked up at her, and she saw his face. And it was... She would think of this later. She would think of this always. It was more open than she had ever seen it. All the control,
all the layers, all the weight of what he was and what he carried. Still there, all of it, but held differently, as if someone had opened a window in a room that had been sealed too long. He stood. She stood. He held her face in his hands. "I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you," he said. "Don't," she said. "Stop trying to deserve things. Just be here." "Here," he said. "Yes, here." He kissed her, and she kissed him back, and the Sunday morning light lay across the penthouse floor in long golden bars, and from somewhere 40 floors below came the vast and unremarkable sound of the city, continuing to be exactly what it was. Chapter 20. The Unhealable Wound. There is a medical concept Elena had learned early in her training, one of the first things a surgical resident encounters when they begin to understand the full, complicated reality of bodies and what can be done to repair them. Some wounds heal completely. Clean edges, appropriate conditions, the body's extraordinary machinery doing its work, and the tissue closes and mends, and what remains is only the faintest trace, detectable perhaps to practiced hands, invisible to the casual eye. Some wounds leave scars that stay, permanent, fully healed but permanently altered, the structure of the original replaced by something stronger, if less flexible, a record written in the language of the body. And some wounds, the deepest kind, the ones that reach places that cannot be fully sutured, places where the damage runs beneath any technique she possesses, some wounds remain open. Not bleeding, not infected, not incompatible with life, just open, present, a permanent, tender place that the body learns to live around. The wound that Luca Marino carried was the third kind. She understood this completely, had understood it since Carmela told her about Sophia, since she found the old scar with her hands, since she heard him not make a sound in the back of an SUV, while she made a decision that would change both their lives. She had never tried to heal it. She knew better than to try. Some wounds could not be healed, only accompanied, witnessed, carried alongside. This was what she was for him, not a cure, a companion to the wound. And he was, for her, the thing she had not known she needed to want, the risk that was worth taking, the vulnerability that the math said yes to, the proof that being afraid of wanting something was not the same as not being allowed to have it. They were married in October, a year and 3 months after the night Sal had called her at the clinic, and she had heard Luca's controlled silence on the line and decided to go. The ceremony was small, 20 people, which in the context of his world was remarkably restrained, and he had been clear from the beginning that small was what he wanted. Not from secrecy. The world knew about them now, had known for months. The integration had happened in the specific, managed way that things integrated into his world when he decided they would. And Elena had been careful and aware, and ultimately unmolested. But small because what he was doing was personal, and personal things deserved to be kept close. Carmela cried through the entire ceremony, and was unrepentant about it. Sal stood best man and gave a toast that was exactly 4 sentences long, which was exactly right for Sal. Luca has spent his life being very good at things and very alone about it. Elena changed that. He's still very good at things. He's less alone. He raised his glass. Marco was there,
Marco had come, sitting near the back with a quiet, observational manner that reminded Elena powerfully of Luca at their first clinical meetings, watching everything, giving nothing away, figuring things out. After the ceremony, he had shaken Luca's hand and held it for a moment longer than a handshake required, and neither of them said anything, and Elena had looked away, because that moment was only for them. She wore a dress the colour of cream, simple and honest, and she carried no flowers, because she had never in her life been a woman who carried flowers. She carried nothing except herself. He was at the front of the room in dark wool, and when she came down the aisle, which in the private room of the restaurant in Little Italy was a short aisle, 6 steps, nothing remotely grand, he looked at her with the full weight of everything he was, the empire and the history and the grief and the love and the attempt, genuine and ongoing, to be more than what he had been made. She reached him. He took her hand. His hand was warm and steady, as always. The officiant, a judge, someone Elena preferred not to know the precise nature of Luca's relationship with, began. She looked at Luca through the words. He looked at her. There was in his face something that was not happiness exactly. Happiness was too simple a word for what she saw there. It was more like the specific, particular expression of a man who had come to believe, after long disbelief, that he was allowed to be where he was. When it came to vows, they had written their own. This had been her idea. She spoke first. "I came to you as a doctor," she said, "and I learned something that doesn't get said enough in medicine, which is that healing is not always the goal. Sometimes the goal is presence, being with someone in whatever state they're in, not trying to fix the unfixable, just accompanying it." She held his gaze. "I am not here to fix you, Luca. I am here to be with you, in the difficult and the ordinary and the things we can't predict, honestly and with the full reality of who we are. That is what I vow." He was very still. She saw the muscle in his jaw work, a contained, enormous thing happening behind his eyes. He spoke. "I have spent most of my life," he said, "being very good at keeping the world at a distance that felt like strength and functioned as armour. And then you walked into a room and saw through it immediately, without making it a project or a mission, just by being exactly what you are." He paused. "What I vow to you is honesty, always, even when honesty is the harder thing, and presence. The kind of presence I am still learning, the kind that does not hide behind strength when what is needed is something softer." He held her gaze. "And I vow that whatever I am and whatever my world demands of me, you will always know that you are the most important thing in it, not a part of the empire, the thing the empire is for." She had not planned to cry. She did not cry easily, but his eyes were wet. Controlled, of course, because he was Luca, and he did not permit himself the full expression of things in public. And she felt her own throat tighten with something vast and true. "I do," she said when the moment came. "I do," he said. The room, those 20 people, made a sound that was the collective sound of people witnessing something real. They went to Italy for 2 weeks. Naples first, because he had not been back in years and wanted to show her where his family came from. The house where his grandfather had lived, the street where Roberto Marino had learned to be what he became, the church where his parents had married.
Then the Amalfi Coast, which was neither dark nor complicated, which was simply beautiful in the most direct way imaginable, all light and colour and sea. She had not been to Italy before, and she found that she understood through it something about him that had always been present but not fully articulated. The Italian part of him, which was not the professional architect of power, but something older and more physical, more attached to table and conversation and the rituals of food and family, was very visible here. He walked differently. He laughed more. He translated things for her that didn't need translating, signs, menus, the history of particular streets, and she let him do it because she understood that it was another form of accompaniment, him bringing her into a part of himself he had kept at a distance from most of his life. On the last evening on the Amalfi Coast, they sat on the terrace of the villa they had rented and watched the sun go down over the water in the specific, extravagant way the sun went down over the Tyrrhenian Sea. Colours she had no precise names for, gold and rose, and a deep blue that arrived at the horizon and spread upward through the sky as the light diminished. "I'm going to tell you something," he said. She turned from the view. He was looking at her. Since Sophia, I have been braced," he said, "against everything. It is the most honest description I can give. I have been a man with his body braced against impact, all the time, every day, as a survival strategy." He paused. You have not removed that. I want to be honest. The bracing is still there, in some fundamental place. It will probably always be there. That is the nature of the wound. She nodded. She was listening. "But with you," he said, "with you, there are moments when I forget to brace, when I am simply present, not anticipating the blow." He held her gaze. "That is the most significant thing anyone has ever done for me. The forgetting. Brief though it is." She reached across the table, put her hand on his. "The wound doesn't have to heal," she said. "It just has to be survivable." "With you, it is," he said. Below them, the sea continued its ancient, indifferent conversation with the coast. Above them, the sky went from rose to deep purple to the particular blue of full night. The lights of the villages along the water appeared, one by one, small and warm and enduring. "Luca," she said. "Yes? Are you happy?" He looked at her for a long moment, the dark eyes, the precise face, the man who had been shot and rebuilt and braced, and was, in this specific moment, unbraced. "Yes," he said, improbably, and with full awareness of everything that complicates it. "Yes." "Me too," she said, improbably. He turned her hand over in his, pressed his lips to her palm, briefly, a gesture that was entirely private, nothing performed, just the small, honest languages that people who loved each other developed in the space between them. "What now?" she asked. "Now," he said, "we go home." Home. The penthouse in Tribeca, with her books crammed next to his, and the Florence painting on the wall, and the piano in the side room, and Carmela coming on Sunday, and Sal outside in whatever car was currently appropriate, and Marco, now, with his quiet, observational manner, and his third graders in Philadelphia, and his slowly opening willingness to be a brother. Home. the life they were building in the space between his world and hers, the territory they had mapped between them, complicated and real and entirely theirs. She thought of that night, 3 in the morning, a year and a half ago, a phone call she had almost not answered, a man on a gurney who was trying not to make a sound. She thought of the wound she had opened and repaired, the lung she had sutured back into wholeness, the body she had returned to function. And she thought of the other wound, the deeper one, the unhealable one. You couldn't repair that kind. You couldn't suture it closed or remove the scar tissue or restore the original structure. You could only, as she had learned from the best surgeons she had trained under, as she had come to understand through years of practicing the impossible art of putting bodies back together, you could only accompany it, be present to it, work around it with care and knowledge and the particular kind of love that did not require wholeness to offer itself. She had come to him as a surgeon. She had stayed as something else entirely. And in the deepening Italian night, with the sea below and the stars above, and his hand in hers, and everything, the wound and the love and the complication and the future that was being made, carefully, one day at a time, everything was exactly as real as it needed to be. That was, she decided, the best any of them could hope for. That was, she decided, enough. In the private hospital records of a discreet clinic on East 63rd Street, there is a file. The patient's name is listed simply as L.M. The attending physician is E. Vasquez. The admission date is August, 3 in the morning. The discharge notes read, "Patient recovered fully. Follow-up complete. Prognosis, excellent." The word excellent is, like most medical assessments, both accurate and incomplete. The wound in his lung healed cleanly. The damage to his chest, sutured and repaired, left only a faint trace that even practiced hands, after a year, could barely find. The other wound, the one that predated the shooting by 7 years, the one that had no physical location and could not be addressed by any surgical technique she possessed, that one remained. But wounds, Elena Vasquez had learned a very long time ago, did not have to be healed to be survived. They only had to be carried. By the right person, in the right way, with the right company. She had come to him as a surgeon. She was, she had discovered, the right company. That was, in the end, the only diagnosis that mattered.